spiritual excellence, family, ummah, craftsmanship, and fitness. These are the elements of the deep life. And Sultans and Sneakers is the podcast that inspires Muslim men to live the deep life. I'm your host, Mahin the podcaster, and welcome to the show.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to another episode of Sultans and Sneakers. I'm your host, Mahin the podcaster. And on today's episode, for the first time on this channel, I am honored to have Shaykh Ismail Kamdar, all the way from South Africa. Shaykh Ismail is someone who I've been in touch with for the past several years. We've spoken before when I was on the Mad Mamluk. So first time here for Sultans and Sneakers. So Shaykh Ismail, welcome.
Assalamu alaikum. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely.
I actually enjoy your show. I was going through your list of topics and past guests, and it's very unique and varied. Like it's just randomly jumping to a bunch of topics, but it's almost always something that I'm interested in. So
yeah. Well, that's the idea, I think. Before we get started, I want to give everyone a quick intro on you. You graduated from the Alimiyyah Program in 2006 and then completed a BA in Islamic Studies at International Open University in 2014. You specialize in Fiqh, Tafsir history, and then and I think you came on our radar because of your work in Islamic Studies and personal development, and you're the founder of Islamic Self-Help. You talk about the show, so the channel just a lot of times I made a distinct shift in the channel back in August of last year towards more of like a productivity slant focus on this idea of like the deep life. Previously, though, what was happening, it was all about like, anyone that was interested in, I just spoke to them about like why they believe what they believed in. So that's why you got all kinds of like interesting, varied people, whether Muslim or non-Muslim. If there's a topic that I wanted to cover, I wanted to cover. But I realized that like for me, the stuff that I was interested in personally, the kind of content that I enjoyed was more like productivity-based stuff. Like I'm always looking for nuggets, and there's also, and the thing is, for me, like what it came down to, I don't think productivity, time management, deep work, all that stuff, I don't think it's really complicated theoretically. I think it's one of those things that is just hard to execute because the discipline is required, right? People, we get lazy, we get complacent. And so I listen to that content more, not so of much of a like for new information, but like as a reminder to get like almost, and people say you shouldn't use motivation to externally motivate. And I'm like, I get it, but like sometimes you're not in that state. You need something to like push you. So that's kind of why I moved the show in that direction, to have people talk about like their personal habits, which in the Muslim space is a little hard sometimes because, especially with our mashayikh, they've accomplished a lot, but they don't like talking about themselves. So therefore, I'm like, yeah, but like, and from a point of humility, but I'm like, yeah, but what you're saying could benefit somebody. It could trigger an idea for somebody, or someone's having a roadblock somewhere. And, so that's kind of the theme of the channel, but I do appreciate you listening.
Yeah. No, I think for the mashayikh, we have two problems when it comes to this, right? One is you don't want to come across as boasting, right? But the other problem is people will judge us.
Right.
Like if we talk about productivity habits, now I'm someone who doesn't really care, so I'll talk about it. But like for me, a productivity habit is playing video games, right? I play a lot of video games to help me think better. They really help with creative thinking and strategic thinking. So a lot of people wouldn't want to say that publicly because they worry about what others are going to think about them.
Yeah.
And I understand that because there's a lot of everybody has their own expectations of what the sheikh's life must be like. And if you don't fit in that box, people immediately tune out. They're like, I can't listen to this guy.
And we that reminds me, there is certainly an expectation that we put on people, it's even our teachers, about like being like, so I remember when Ertugrul was the hit, like right now, Correllos Osman. I don't know if you follow the Turkish series or not, but yeah, you're probably at least familiar with film. Yeah. So when Ertugrul was out, I remember I was at a gathering with Dr. Omar Farooq Abdullah, here in Chicago. He lives in Chicago, and he actually mentioned something like praising Ertugrul and like how it's art, and people are following it and all this kind of stuff, right? And, he was obviously aware of it. He didn't necessarily specifically mention that, like, oh, he consumes the content, right? Or watches it himself. But I had mentioned it to one of his like students or one of his murids, who was a friend of mine, and I kind of was like, "Oh yeah, Dr. Omar said that. I think he watches the Arturul, or he mentioned it." He's like, "No, man, he doesn't watch TV. He hasn't watched TV in 40 years." And I was like, "Yo, chill, dude. It's like, it ain't that serious. Like, you know what I mean? I'm not trying to indict the dude. I'm just like, he just mattered. I figured since he mentioned it in passing in this talk, and Dr. Omar is someone who always talks about like, this cultural imperative and like appreciating greater culture and all that kind of stuff. So I'm like, it's like, if he did, what's the problem? Like, but sometimes it's like the students themselves make this like aura or pedestal. They're like, oh, they're not human beings anymore. This is like, or they refer to some story of the past of some wali of Allah, but they're like, yo, they didn't have television and stuff that we have. So like maybe the entertainment they had back then, they consumed it. I don't know. I just feel like, yeah.
I'll tell you one weird story I read, right? I was reading through some descriptions of some of the famous scholars. One of them, in his library, he had a music room to relax in.
Right.
And listen to his slave girls playing music and singing for him.
Right.
This was, for that time, like one of the top scholars of that era.
Sure.
Right? I mean, if I had to do that today, it's be the end of my career.
Right. So I definitely today we had a certain agenda planned, which we'll stick to. But before we start, so just for high level, what I'll give the audience the high level brief. You've talked about productivity a lot. We don't want to keep regurgitating content, but the idea for this show was that, as someone myself, I'm trying to always, I host a podcast channel on it, right? That doesn't mean I'm good at it. I have a lot of gaps. I'm going to walk you through a typical week for me of what like happens, what I aspire to do, and then actually what happens. And then also my mindset and whatnot, and the anxiety that comes with things. But then before, it's like you can kind of audit it more or less. You can tell me where I'm going wrong, where I should just chill and like not worry about it too much, etc. So yeah, that should be fun. It should be a fun exercise. But before we get into that, obviously, our hearts are with our brothers and sisters in Gaza, with what's been transpiring over the past week. So the question I have is like, when something like this happens, right? And I feel like we are almost as a community numb to this kind of stuff. Although this is ramped up, this is something a little like higher intensity than anything else, especially with the way the media narrative is, putting stuff out and whatnot. But when something like this happens, and we're in the United States or England, or you're in South Africa, we're in distant lands, disconnected essentially. What is the proper approach for someone who's trying to be productive? Muslims trying to be productive. They have got day-to-day responsibilities, but obviously this calamity hits, and we have to have care for the ummah. What's the approach that you think is most beneficial for us? Maybe at a high level, and then maybe we can talk about like granular stuff.
That's a good question. Firstly, we make dua for our brothers and sisters in Palestine. We ask Allah to grant them victory.
I mean,
but this is. This is something a lot of people actually called me about this week. People called me and said like they can't concentrate on work. They want to just get up and go. They take their passport and go and go there and be with the Palestinians. And you're not really going to be able to make much of a difference. You're not even going to be able to get in, right? But just the fact, I told people that the fact that you're thinking like that is a sign of iman. It's a sign of faith, right? And a sign of ummatic brotherhood, which really wasn't there that much about 50 years ago, right? The Ummah was very splintered into nation states, each country focused on their own. We've come a long way in the past 30 years to having a sense of Ummah, where you in America, I'm in South Africa, and we're talking about Palestine, and everyone's hearts are with each other, right? We've come a long way. Another area that we've come a long way is in fighting the propaganda, because 30 years ago, the Zionists had a complete control over all media narratives related to Palestine. But today, with social media and Muslim news channels and our podcasting channels, we have the counter narrative out there. And more people are being exposed to it, and more people are slowly starting to realize that the Palestinians are the good guys. right? Which was very difficult to do 30 years ago. But that's something that we can do. So if you ask what can we do, right? Firstly, I think there's two parts. There's one, do we stay productive on our work and our lives, or do we like just focus entirely on this? And the other thing is, what can we even do about this? And regarding productivity, I'd go with the hadith that even if the world is ending and you're about to plant a tree, go ahead and plant it, right?
Right.
So you life has to continue, work has to continue. You have to just keep moving forward, regardless of what's going on in the world. I'll give you a personal example of this. About 2 years ago, we were in the middle of the pandemic and the lockdown, and things got really bad in my community, and there were riots and looting in our area, right? So we had to like barricade our neighborhoods, stand watch with guns, protect our families. There were shootouts in the streets. Yet during work hours, I continued to do my work. My wife continued to take care of the housework. My kids continued to do their studying. We could literally hear helicopters buzzing above and gunshots, but we had to. Things still had to go on, right? I still had to find a way to do the shopping, and get the groceries, and eventually that ended. And a lot of the work I produced during that time, there's a lot of barakah in it. And for me, that event in my life was a turning point because it made me realize that no matter how mad the world is going, you have to keep moving forward. You can't let anything stop you from moving forward. Because just say, okay, let's just say that out of concern for the Palestinians, you become depressed, right? You're just sitting and watching, you're just scrolling through Twitter, seeing all these videos, and you're not doing anything else. You're just scrolling through Twitter, seeing all these videos, getting more and more depressed and despondent. What does that accomplish? Who does that benefit, right? But if you're at least taking care of your family, you at least benefiting your family. So on one side, I would tell people to keep moving forward, keep focusing on your work, on your projects, on your family. Don't become so despondent by what's going on in the world that you lose your ability to take care of yourself and your family. On the other hand, you should be doing something, right? You should have genuine care and concern for Muslims anywhere in the world that are suffering, especially Palestine, because that's our holy land. I said in my khutbah yesterday that Palestine being under attack is like Makkah or Medina being under attack. These are our three holy lands, right? It's obviously going to hurt. So you should have concern and you should be doing something. And something today, again, we far away, but we can send aid, right? We do have Islamic organizations that will take aid to them once things calm down. We can, use our money to finance that. We can counter the narrative by uh, going online and talking the truth, and when you're seeing people posting lies to counter it. I'm seeing a lot of that from our brothers online. I know like Muhammad Hijab's doing a great job with that on Twitter. I'm seeing many people doing a great job with that on YouTube as well. That's something we can do and we should do, because we should not underestimate how powerful it is when the average person's opinion on this changes. Just say the average American's opinion on this changes, and now the majority of Americans realize that the Palestinians are right. That's going to put pressure on the government to stop their $1 billion aid going to Israel, right? That's going to put pressure on it eventually. It won't happen now, maybe 5 or 10 years down the line, but the stepping stones towards that is to start turning people's minds by showing them the counter narrative. So we should be involved in that. We shouldn't be afraid to speak out. If we hear people now saying, if someone sides with the Zionists, you should boycott them. Like this actually happened in my community just over the weekend. Like the most famous falafel shop in my community, owned by a Jewish guy.
Yeah.
And when this started, he started cheering on Israel. Whole lot of Muslims put on the Palestinian flags and gear, and they went and sat in his store, and they didn't allow any customers in. And not only did they boycott him, but they protested in his store, so no one could come and buy anything from him.
Right.
So that's doing something, right? That's taking a stand. That's at least showing that we're not going to let you just get away with this any longer. And we also need to have hope. The Ummah's come a long way over the past 50 years. I know sometimes it seems hopeless, but we've come a long way. Really, if you compare the average Muslim today in terms of religiosity and knowledge, economic power, the growth taking place all over the world, the access to resources, the access to knowledge, the level of discourse that we have about the religion, we've come a very long way. You know, my grandparents would tell me when they were young, they didn't even know that you need to wear hijab or that gambling is haram, or they only knew you pray Jummah. You know, that was the extent of knowledge in the villages of India in the 60s. We've come a long way from that, and the Ummah is in a revival phase. And I say the only thing that's really left now is political revival.
Right.
And what we're seeing reminds us that we need the Khilafat. We need our Khilafat back in charge. It's 99 years. Next year will be 100 years. So we need to start figuring out what is the most practical way for a Khilafat to come back. Practical, right? Not ridiculous or extreme, but something practical. Because I feel like most Muslims around the world would be welcoming of a proper Khilafat today.
Sure.
And it would make a really big difference to all of this.
There was a so I appreciate what you said about, I think the average American, like I've been seeing, we're in some WhatsApp groups together, and I was sharing that like a lot of American, like more the whole, one of the people disagree with the whole MAGA, the Make America Great Again, the Trump narrative. I know Trump himself like posted pro-Israeli stuff, but the average American that he catered to, a lot of times they were like America first. So they're kind of fed up with this idea that like, okay, our cities are crumbling, our country's a mess, and we're funding, first of all, Ukraine and now Israel. And I've seen a lot of memes along those lines. Like, they're not necessarily pro-Palestinian, but I think it's a start, the idea of like getting America, because I think that's what Shaykh Hamza Maqbul gave a really good khutbah yesterday, and he was talking about like everyone, if you actually talk to them, most rational people you meet, they're going to be not cool with like innocent civilians just being like massacred, right? And the thing of it is, people who are supporting Israel, to be honest, is like it's just because of the media narrative. They're not really, people are putting out stuff like Hamas is like ISIS and all that stuff, and they're hearing that, and or et cetera, et cetera. So they're naturally most people are just gonna hear that fly by. They're not gonna like really dig into it again. And it's been a decades of propaganda too that's built up to it, right? So I think if we have an opportunity to speak to like, I don't know, non-Muslim friends and colleagues, and I think at work it can be sensitive because there's certain things that are like off limits. Like at my office, these kind of things aren't really discussed, right? Which is fine. I think you're there to work. I think a lot of companies though have a lot more dialogue, and you see it on LinkedIn. You can tell by the culture based upon what you see their LinkedIn people post, right? At my workplace, it's more like for a neutral conversation, we talk about sports or the weekend or where you going on vacation and that kind of thing. Or, but sometimes we build relationships with people at work that are a little deeper, and then you'll become friends with outside of work. And I think those are relationships I think we need to like start like bringing it up to people that like, hey, this is what's going on. And if we educate one by one, I think that, and I agree with you. I think that's the more people at the grassroots. There's a video that came out yesterday. Ron DeSantis, he's the governor of Florida. I think he's running for president in 2024. And some guy, he's doing like a little meet and greet somewhere. It looked like a gas station. And some guy was like calling him out on it. And like, look at all the rubble of Palestinians. And he's like, when he's on Al Jazeera, and Ron DeSantis was like, oh, you should be careful Al Jazeera. It's like Middle East run. And he's like, yeah, I don't think they fabricated these videos, by the way, dude. Like, right. And at the end of the day, he was like, listen, you had my vote, but now you don't anymore. That's what he said. So I think there's this thing. So it'll be interesting to see in America with the election cycle, how we treat our politicians with what's going on right now. Because everyone now is like, Joe Biden's a scumbag, but we all voted for him. I mean, a lot of our people voted for him, but I've seen calls. I saw a call yesterday where we have a Palestinian state rep. And one of the students of knowledge here in Chicago, I'm not sure what he actually said or did, but he called from like, we have to hold him accountable too, first and foremost, because he's one of our own, right? And we better not be supporting anything he's doing in the near future, even, you know what I mean? So I think that's we'll see. We'll see how this goes out. I was telling somebody was asking me at work yesterday. One of my brothers I go to Jummah with was like, he was like, we keep making dua and all this stuff and nothing happens. I'm like, dude, it's only been like not even 100 years. You know what I'm saying? Like in the past, like you read about stories in the past about like they used to like Al-Aqsa used to house horse manure, right? When the Crusaders had it. You know what I mean? So in the grand scheme of things, look at history. It's like the time will come. You know what I'm saying? So I mean, people don't want to hear about patience right now, and I don't blame them, because if your family's there and you see what's happening, they have no other option. It's easier for us to. It's easy for some people to also say that, to pontificate from our comfortable air conditioned homes and out in America or wherever. So yeah, so I do appreciate. One thought I had was, okay, so there's a long-term pragmatic thought that I was thinking about, because you talked about this whole Khilafah situation, right? And I know the Hizb ut-Tahrir guys will always say that we cannot achieve it via the democratic process, et cetera, et cetera. But what are your thoughts? So I'm from Bangladesh, right? We have Americans, we have American citizens of Malaysia, of different nationalities and backgrounds, right? Many of us may have dual citizenship, kind of, you know what I'm saying? What if we're educated here, we worked here, many of our brothers here are really smart. The idea is like, what if we collectively just started going back to our home countries and becoming politicians? You get what I'm saying? Yeah, it's a thought that crosses my mind a lot. It's a long-term game though, right? Mm-hmm. But I don't think I haven't heard anyone really. It crosses my mind every time something like this happened. I'm like, what if, we had more of that? I have one friend who did it. He did it for education. He went there to start a school. He grew up here, but he went back to Bangladesh to start he was on my podcast a long time ago. He started the school for the ambassadors of all the foreign countries and the diplomats, right? So he's very sharp. And so you have the skill set of what you learn here in America, which is advanced, and then you go back and take it back to your home country. I think if we had a collective, like almost like a movement of that could be something that I haven't heard anyone mention that. It's a thought that crosses my mind,
though. When we talk about topics that Muslims need education on, right. I think right at the top of the list right now is siyasa, Islamic politics.
Yeah.
Because people have no clue about how it works, right?
Right.
Most people you talk to have like a very narrow understanding of what Sharia is and what the path is to get there.
Yeah.
But the actual how you get a leader in power, Islam has left it very open. Right? There's no one way of doing it.
Mm-hmm.
This is something a lot of people must because I guess they don't study it. But like if you look at our history, there's never been a single path to political power. Even with the Khulafa Rashidin, each of the Khulafa Rashidin came into power through different methods. Right? There wasn't a single method. Abu Bakr was chosen by the leaders of the Muhajirun and Ansar.
Sure.
Umar was chosen by Abu Bakr. Umar put together 6 people and said, one of you 6 should be the Khalifa. You all decide. Ali was chosen by the people. Right? So others came into power through violence. Right? The Abbasids came into power through massacre. They literally got all the Umayyad princes together and had them assassinated. So Islam doesn't have this, like, you have to use this route to become a leader. It's left it very open, right? That once somebody is in power, they can assume the responsibility of establishing the Sharia. But how they get into power, it's been left very open. And we don't talk about this enough. We don't study this enough. I actually don't even think we have any real courses in the English language on this topic. It's something that I have seen Arabic resources on, but nothing in the English language. The science of how Islamic politics work. Because another question I bring up is, okay, people talk about establishing a caliphate today, and I talk about it myself, but what did it actually look like in the modern world? Because the caliphate didn't just have one form in our history, right? At Yaqeen Institute, you have a great paper by Dr. Emir Anjum called "Who Wants the Caliphate?" Have you read that paper?
It's not a new one. I think it's been out for a while, right?
Yeah. It's a
I
great
recall.
article. Basically, his whole Ummatics Institute stemmed from that article.
Mhm.
But I just wanted to go back to that article because that's what got me. Interestingly, that's what got me involved with Yaqeen in the first place. I read that article and I go, wow, I want to work with these guys, right? And alhamdulillah, I work with Dr. Wemir directly. He's actually my boss at Yaqeen. But in that article, he mentions that there's been like 4 or 5 versions of the Khilafat in our history. And most people don't realize that. That even the Ottoman Empire, there's like 3 different types of Ottoman empires at 3 different points. Right? In terms of how they ruled, the system of governance, it changed over time. The Sharia, there's just certain things that are like fixed, very certain things that are fixed, but almost anything else is flexible. Like I hear people who don't understand Islamic politics, they'll say things like, "Oh, there's no such thing as traffic laws in Islam." I don't need to follow traffic laws.
Mhm.
That's not how it works, right? On the basis of maslahah, you could institute traffic laws. You could. That's how Islamic politics work. The government has the right to make up these kind of laws. It's not, some of us Salafi brothers will say they're ruling by other than the law of Allah. Well, no, they're not, because the law of Allah gives you room to make these kind of laws, right? So you're not ruling by other than the law of Allah. So there's a lot of things on this topic that we don't talk about, that we don't think about, that we haven't studied, and that's why I think we don't really have a clear path back to power, right? The other point you mentioned that's very important. A lot of people, their parents or grandparents moved to the West for economic reasons, right? But the families never went back. And I also think about it. I think, like, what if the families do go back now as millionaires and as wealthy people, and they use that money to uplift their home countries, to turn their home countries around? Wouldn't that help the Muslims rise up to power faster? Or even if you don't go back, why, if you want to live in the USA, why not establish a waqf in your home country that helps orphans with their school fees or something like that? Or you shouldn't be abandoning these lands altogether. We should be, because one of the biggest problems we have living like in USA or South Africa is that we're so physically distanced from the ummah that we sometimes become mentally cut off from the ummah. And we just become concerned with our own selves, our own communities. So there should be ways for us to get back, even if it's not politically, economically, something that we can start with. Many of us have the means to get started economically with uplifting these countries. They need a lot of help. It's not fair that we live in luxury while we don't even think about them.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, that's something that obviously crossed my mind. So I think that's something that maybe we can talk about more. With that, as far as like having those kind of solutions, people having the money. Because I think, I mean, I feel like I go back to Bangladesh pretty frequently, but I think the problem is that we get so busy with our lifestyle here. People even stop going. I asked like some of my friends, and they're like, "When do you go back?" Well, some of them, they only go back because their parents make them. Right? It's not even like they're not even trying to. There's no desire at some point, So as that goes away, you're just gonna get more and more like just tracked. It's gonna go the opposite direction. So, anyways, let's talk about like what we're here to talk about. So you're gonna audit a week in my life, so to speak. Okay, so basically, what I sent you kind of like here. These are some of the things I have to do every week. Obviously, going to work. I work your typical like 9 to 5, and all that stuff. But and then I've got like Arabic class that I take, and then I've got variable items that I try to fit in as well and whatnot. So I'm actually gonna start on Friday because I feel like Friday after Jummah is like the time where I feel like the most optimism is what I'm gonna be able to get done. Okay, the weekend's coming up. I'm gonna have some time to catch up on things. I can plan the next week, right? So after Jummah, usually what will happen is I'm always like, it depends. Some Fridays you're scrambling to wrap some things up that have to get done that day. But I start I might write in my planner. And by the way, let me ask you a question. First of all, for planning, I still use a paper planner, like a Franklin Covey. I don't know, it's like a binder that you replenish the pages every year. They're giving you one, right? And I've been doing it for 10 years. I've always tried to like build consistency with that. far as like taking notes in there and whatnot. But if I were to look back at like some of my years of planners, I would see a lot of blank pages, because some days you just walk in and just like firefighting, right? But so a Friday afternoon after Juma will either be either like Monday, I gotta write this is what I gotta get done. I'll just write, these are the things I gotta do Monday morning when I come to work. And I'm just wrapping up the tasks, right? But I'm at that point, I'm feeling like, okay, I'm feeling like, okay, I got some time. I feel real okay. I'm the weekend coming up. I can catch up and catch my breath. So one of two things will happen on Friday night. I will either, if I can get out of work early enough, I will go to a jiu-jitsu class, right? Now this was much more frequent on Fridays when my daughters were going, because I had to go get them. Like my wife would drop them off, and then I would. And at that point, I was like, okay, they would go on Fridays, and I would have to get them. Recently, my oldest started HIFs, and so she has Wednesday night and Friday night for HIFs. So she can't go to jiu-jitsu on Friday night. So therefore, the pill or the domino that forces me to go no matter what was removed. Right. So now I'm kind of like, sitting back. It's like 4:30, and this happened. It literally happened yesterday. So 4:30, I'm working on some stuff. I'm kind of like waiting. So I have a friend that I train with, right? He just got his blue belt. So sometimes he'll text me. He's like, "Hey, you're going to class?" And if he says he's going to class, then I'll go, because I like training with him, right? But I didn't hear from him, and it was raining. I felt like, I got some work I need to do. Let me work for another hour or so to like 4:30 or something. It's 4:30 now. I'll work to 5:30. I'm not gonna go jiu-jitsu, but maybe I'll go home. In my head, I'm thinking I'm gonna go to the gym tonight, though, right? Meanwhile, the work creeps. Because now I have no cutoff time for leaving work on Friday, because before it would be like 5 o'clock. I got in my car to make my class, because it's an hour drive. Okay, 5:30 or so hits, and then you're like, okay, I want to pray Asr. And then I'm like, I still have wudu, and then I still got some stuff I got to finish up. Oh, Maghrib's in 20 minutes. So now 6 o'clock. It's going to be 6:20. I don't leave work till almost 6:45 now, right? PM. And at this point, I'm like, I'm hungry. I've got food at home, but I'll just get something to drive through. And the stuff I eat and drive through even is going to be like something that's going to be, isn't terribly bad for you. It might be like rice and chicken or something, right? But I just don't feel like. And then I go home and I don't go to. Remember I said I might go to the gym. I didn't go to the gym. I end up. I was like, oh, there's a David Beckham series on Netflix. I need to finish that. And I was like, and I'm going to sleep relatively early because I know I had the podcast this morning. So let's talk about Friday. So Friday, there's a goal for some kind of physical activity, and that did not happen. It seems like there was also some. I did not set a drop dead time on when I was leaving, and partially it's like this for Friday afternoon for me. If I don't go to my jiu-jitsu class, if I know I don't have to rush out, I sometimes will stay at work. I get into that flow state because Friday everyone leaves by 3 o'clock. It is a ghost town, right? So you feel like, oh, I can get some stuff done. I can kind of like work through some stuff, But then the problem is that like there's no drop, there's no like time. Are you familiar with Parkinson's law, right? Work expands until the time around it. So there's no limit. So therefore, it just creeps to as far as possible. And then obviously, if I'm finishing work at 6:10 and Maghrib's in like 10 minutes. I'm not gonna go drive, because by the time I get to my car, it'll be Maghrib time. I might as well just wait for Maghrib, and all said and done, by the time I pray Maghrib and then shut my computer down, it's almost 7 o'clock. You know what I'm saying? So, anyways, so let's audit Friday first, which is supposed to be like kind of like the kickoff for the week. What if you cut everything? What do you hear? What were the gaps, and what would you do differently?
Okay, so the first thing that I want to ask you about on a Friday, is everything you're doing sounds like it's far away from each other. Like there's a lot of driving involved, right?
I drive a lot, yes.
Yeah, so like there's nothing closer to you where you can get the same.
Correct. Yeah, my work So I'll tell you my commute in the morning. If I'm really lucky, it'll be 35 minutes to go to work. But on average in the morning, you take one guy. It's like one guy texting on his phone gets into a car wreck.
Yeah,
man, it's like an hour. You know what I'm saying? The highway's just jammed. You're right. So it'll be like probably I would say an average an hour in the morning to get to work. On the way home, it'll take me like 30 minutes or so. And if I wait, that's the thing. And sometimes in my head, I'm like, oh, if I just wait to leave work till like after 6 o'clock, I'll get home in like 35 minutes. There won't be traffic. Yeah. So that's one thing. Yep.
So how many hours of the day goes in the car on a Friday?
On a Friday in a car. So let's say in the morning, it'll be 1 hour because on Friday, I take my kids to school and then I go to work. So let's just say 1 hour in the morning. Add in going to Jummah. That's another midday. That's probably another 30 minutes, half an hour or so. So hour and a half. And then if I'm going to, and then probably 2.5 hours on Friday. Let's just say 2.5 hours in the car.
You combine the amount of time you have to sleep with eating, with salah, with sitting in the car,
right,
with work.
Yeah,
you're not really left with much time to yourself, right?
Right.
And I think the first problem here is that you're trying to cram too much into too little time.
Right.
So you have you have a wrong assumption that you're going to be able to get these things done on a Friday.
Right.
Maybe what would work for you is moving those goals to a different day.
You meaning like the jujitsu after work kind of thing? Okay.
Specifically that. So one of the problems a lot of us have with time management is.
But the thing is that'll be the case. So let's take a Monday for example. A Monday would be average. You know, it'll take me let's say 45 minutes to go to work in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
If I go to any day I go to jujitsu, I'm going to go directly from work. It's going to be 1 hour.
Okay, but you see the big difference is there's no Jummah on a Monday.
That's true. Yeah. So
right? Another big difference. Let's just dive into this a little bit. What's your mind like on a Friday? Because for me, on a Friday, my brain is tired, right? I tend to schedule my most demanding activities on a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday.
Okay.
Because by Friday, my brain's on weekend mode. It wants to relax.
Yeah.
And therefore, if I'm going to schedule anything really, really intensive on a Friday, it's either not going to get done or it's not going to be the quality that I want. So I tend to take things easy on a Friday. I focus on my khutbah and I focus on if I have a halaqah, that's it. Otherwise, I take things very easy on a Friday because I understand how my brain works.
Yeah.
How does your brain work on a Friday?
I think it just depends. So I'll tell you, yesterday, I knew my boss was on vacation. My director, his boss was out. So in my head, I'm like, I only got these things to do. Maybe I can like leave after Jummah, right? But what I had going on was pretty important as well. And I was like, I had to babysit a lot of other people's work. So other people had to do stuff that I had to like kind of like bird dog a little bit just to check that they were doing, not on my team, but other teams, right? So obviously that didn't happen because I didn't leave work till almost 7 o'clock. Like leaving after Jummah means like leaving at 3. Like, or you go to Jummah and just leave from there, right?
Yeah.
So to me, I don't know that there's any difference necessarily. I think when I come in on Friday, it's more like, I don't know if I'm excited. It's more like, I don't think I'm in relaxed mode. I'm still there to get stuff done. I don't feel like I'm letting up. And like I said, sometimes it can be in the afternoon. I think the thing of it is that like it's around the 4 p.m. time frame how I feel, right? Some days around the 4 p.m. time frame, if I feel like energized and I'm like motivated, those are the days that I'm gonna go to jujitsu.
Yeah,
you get what I'm saying? That I will then like feel like, okay, I feel like dialed in. Let me just wrap up real quick. I'm gonna pray Asr and then go. Right? Like get out by 5 o'clock. The days that I feel more lethargic will be the days I tend to stay at work. Because there's nothing that's whatchamacallit, calling me to be at a certain place at a certain time.
So one mistake I'm noticing here is you're working on motivation, right?
Yeah.
And as long as someone's working on motivation, things won't get done,
Right.
because we are rarely are we ever actually motivated to do something. This is where self-discipline comes in.
Right.
Nobody likes to work out. Nobody likes to wake up early. Okay, some people do, but most people don't, right?
Yeah.
Nobody, like, let me give you an example. Like for myself, for writing my books, if I only have to write when I'm motivated, nothing will get done,
Right.
right? Because you rarely ever motivated to sit and write a book. Like, where does that motivation come from?
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, it's discipline. I have a habit. I force myself to write 1,000 words minimum every single day, regardless of how tired I am, regardless of whether I have ideas or not, regardless of whether I'm going to publish it or not. I force myself to do it. That is something that I don't compromise on. And I think for you, what you need to figure out is how can you move away from a motivation mindset to making this one of your things you can't compromise on.
Non-negotiable.
What's the long term goal? What's the goal of jiu-jitsu for you? How does it fit into your life vision or your life plan?
Right. Oh, for me, you're asking me. I think for me, it's just there's a few things. You know, I the idea of self-defense and being able to and learning a craft. That's one thing. The idea of doing something jointly with my daughters, like having a common activity. Because my oldest and I, we started around the same time, about a little over 2 years ago, right? Obviously, I have a goal to advance in belt levels. You know, I think I think if you ask any jujitsu, well, I would think, like for me at least, I'm still a white belt, but I would say, okay, in 10, 15 years, I'd like to be a black belt, right? I know it takes like a lot of work and all that, whatnot, but I think this idea of this accomplishment and having a skill set and actually having something that's like a proper self-defense tool at your disposal. You know what I'm saying? And the physical fitness that comes with it, right? Because when I look at physical fitness, and I've talked about this before, is when I started my own journey with physical fitness, I had a coach. I approached it. It was a very much like a bodybuilding style regimen, which I enjoy. You know what I'm saying? I actually like the process. Like there is a thing about like the thing about the gym that's interesting for me is that when I get on the gym, when I'm in a routine with the gym, it's very enjoyable. It's like it becomes very fixed now. Now you're like in it but it's very fleeting as well. If you start skipping it days, you can lose it too, right? So there's like this momentum aspect of the gym. But when I'm there, I enjoy it, right? When I'm at jiu-jitsu, a lot of times now, sometimes I'm just getting my butt kicked. So you're like, man, this sucks. But some days you're like, something actually works. You tried it out. You watched the video. You tried it. So I think this idea of craftsmanship, but I don't have like I'm not obsessed with it like some of my classmates either. You know what I'm saying? Like you always, everyone has hobbies that they're like, that's all that they get really into it. I wouldn't say that I'm really into it, but I'm looking into it like, okay, it's something that's productive. It's good for fitness. It's a self-defense tool, and it's a commonality with my kids. So there's a lot of things there. But then, and my idea is that, well, if I'm going to do it, I might as well get better at it over time. And because there's a belt system, I like this idea. Because when you look at other kinds of like the gym, so I feel like everyone should have some kind of physical fitness outlet, right? So powerlifting does not interest me. Just doesn't.
I think
right?
one of the problems I'm recognizing here is that whatever your actual reasons are for going for jiu-jitsu, you can accomplish that outside of it. You don't really need it. So in your mind, you're like, even if I don't go, I'll spend time with my daughters elsewhere. I get my physical fitness elsewhere.
I could,
So there's no real strong motivation to do this specific task, because the goals are being accomplished whether you do it or not. There are other ways to accomplish those goals, right? That you are already doing.
What? But I would have to do something for self-defense though.
Well, okay? How badly do you need self-defense in wherever you live? I mean, when was the last time you needed it?
No, I don't think it's I think it's the idea of, I see what you're saying, but it's the aspirational idea of having it. You get what I'm saying?
I think at this point for you, it's more of a I would like to have it rather than I need to have it. All right.
Mm-hmm.
And if something is in the I'd like to have it category, you're not going to be motivated to do it consistently every week. All right. So, for example, self-defense. If you are living in an area where if you don't know self-defense, you're going to get your butt whooped in front of your kids, right?
Yeah.
You have that motivation, right?
Sure. Right.
To learn it. But if you're living a comfortable, cozy, upper middle class lifestyle, it's just more of a nice to have that makes you feel manly, that you know self-defense, right? And in your mind, you probably do know other types of self-defense already. So this is just a bonus. It's not. I mean, I'm doubt at your age you haven't learned any type of self-defense yet, right?
Actually, no, I don't think I've ever have.
Really?
Like I haven't been. I have not probably been. I haven't been into a physical altercation probably since like high school, early high school.
Wow.
So I'm
You live in a
41.
different world from me.
Yeah. So I can go back. It was like, I remember it was like some kids at school. We were freshmen. I was ninth grade. I was like 14 years old. Some guys, they wanted to fight. And like him and his cousin wanted to fight me and my friend. So we're like, okay, it's like a 2-on-2 thing. And I remember we're in the back, we're kind of like playing football outside. And I just told my friend, hey, just throw him to the side and we'll just double team the big guy. And we just took him out. You know what I'm saying? That was the last time I can remember. This is like 1995. So it's been a while.
So like if you've never needed self-defense skills since 95, right, to 23, in your mind, this is again, it's not something that you're gonna have any real motivation to do, other than it being a nice to have, right? That it would be nice to have these skills,
right?
But it's not going to negatively impact your life in any way if you don't do it. You see, these are the thoughts in the back of the mind that we don't really realize are there, right?
Yeah.
And so I would say one of two things: either find a deeper reason to go for jujitsu, or
there's also a financial component here, right? So one thing I do is, if I can commit, so when I started, my daughter, my oldest and I, we started jujitsu. If you pay for the entire year up front, it's cheaper per month. But it also mentally locks you in, kind of, because you're like, oh, I'm paying for this, so therefore I have to go, in a way, right? So granted, I renewed my thing in June, so I still have until June. You get what I'm saying? So I'm not like, I'm also like, I'm not gonna just like throw my, I see what you're saying, but I purposely did it financially that way to be like, kind of like put that extra burden on myself mentally. They'll be like, hey, dude, you're paying for this.
I don't think the financial thing works very well unless you're poor.
Okay.
And then the money means a lot to you, right? But if that's money that you can make up quickly,
it's not cheap though either.
Yeah, but I mean, even if it's not cheap, but if it's something you can make up within that time frame, if it doesn't hurt you in any way, like, then it's still not a strong enough motivational factor to get the task done, and it shouldn't be the reason why we should be doing a specific task, right?
Okay.
So I'll advise you one of two things: either find a stronger reason to do this task, or replace it with something that you're more interested in, something that you actually enjoy, but it gives you it ticks all those same boxes, right? Because I'm not really seeing that love for jiu-jitsu. It's just like it's just there, and I think this is a problem. And also Americans, they like to overschedule your lives, right? Like you've got something scheduled for every day of the week, and almost every hour, and I don't think that's a healthy lifestyle. It's a very American way of doing things. It's For me, that's strange. That's
and we've only done one day so far. We've only done Friday. Yeah. Okay. All right. So noted. Very good advice. Actually, I was like really thought provoking, to be honest. Find so I think number one, I will like my takeaway from this is like I will try to find a bigger why for jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
A bigger why.
But if you can't find a bigger why, then you need to find an alternative activity.
Right. Okay. So now Saturday rolls in. So now Fridays, the thing with the weekends, and this is something that I'm sure a lot of brothers have this issue with. You have this, you're like, okay, I can relax, or I can, ideally, I want to go to bed early, right? By like 11 o'clock at night or something, and then you get a good, decent enough sleep, wake up for Fajr, and then you can start Saturday kind of early, right? But what happens often is that this happened last week. So last Friday, Shaykh Joe Bradford.
Yeah.
Shaykh Joe was in town, and I went to his program, and then afterwards, some of the guys, we went out to have dinner. And so I didn't think I got home till like probably like midnight or so, right? And then you don't sleep right away. It's almost like 1 a.m. You wake up for Fajr, you go right back to sleep. I hear a lot about people like saying that you want to keep your sleep consistent, like 7 days a week. What time you go to bed and what time you wake up. So today I did. So today I was up because I had to, and part of the reason I scheduled this podcast, I was like, okay, it'll force me to get up, stay up for Fajr. I can't like sleep at 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. and like pray Fajr. And then I'm also not wanting to do a podcast where I'm like, and I'm the kind of guy that I want like 7 hours of sleep. Like 7 hours for me is like what is kind of like my sweet spot. 6 is a little pushing it, to be honest, for me. And then 8, usually I'll wake up before 8. I won't like usually wake up. I'll wake up usually before 8 hours. But anyways, so today we're doing this podcast. It's going to go, let's say go another hour or so. But I already know in my head, what am I doing? At 11 o'clock my time, I'm going to start watching football. It's Saturday, right? Now, I already know this in my head. I'm not like planning like any aspirational thing, but I'm like, but in my head, man, I was like, the only thing I'm trying to get in though, I was like, oh, I got to find some time to go to the gym. So, because I have a game to watch from 11 to 2. And I think, yeah, the way I say it, like, I have to watch this, which I kind of like, it's like not an option. And then there's like, you see an invite, there's a program Shaykh Hamza Maqbool's doing. They have a dua and dhikr for Izzah at 6 p.m. And he has an online version, but I always prefer to go in person whenever I can because I'm in Chicago. It's like, okay, but it's again, now you're driving 40 minutes, 35 minutes, 40 minutes. And so I'm like, okay, I got to watch this game. There's a 3 o'clock game too. I got to go to the gym. Yeah. So that's already how I'm thinking about my Saturday. Saturday for me is like relaxing and watching football, but then I'm still trying to like fit some random nuggets of stuff in. You get what I'm saying? So, as I'm starting Saturday, how do you assess it? It seemed like I'm going to give my hypothesis of what you're going to say. I think you're going to say that don't be hung up on driving 40 minutes. Like just call in online if you can for the Zoom. You also shouldn't watch 10 hours of football. But also it's what I do to relax. Like I think last week I watched like 8-9 hours of football. This happens during the fall. Like I like Saturday football for me is like the thing every fall. So it's kind of like it's something that's like what you look back, you're like, well, there's 8 hours down the drain.
So I'm actually going to go in a very opposite direction with this. Why do you feel the need that you have to be productive on a Saturday?
I don't in the set. Oh, man, you mean like, why do I? Because the ideal part of me is like, because all the energy, because Monday through Friday, I have to, by the time I get home from work, I'm just beat. Right? I'm exhausted. Like you're tired. I'll just like sit down and like fall asleep on the couch kind of thing. A lot of it is like what I'm doing for the podcast. So I mentioned in my notes to you that the podcast is a variable item for me. Okay.
Yeah.
Now the thing about the podcast is this. So I am not like 100% satisfied with my 9 to 5 in this sense. I like my work. I enjoy it. I like my coworkers and all that stuff. But I've also come to this realization that like it's not going to get me true financial independence. Okay. Yeah. That has to be, and I've been interacting. I don't know if you saw my I did a podcast back in when I went to the Al-Maqasid retreat. Shaykh Yahya wrote this. I mentioned that I met this brother there named Dan Henry. He's like one of these digital multimillionaire types, right? Like we're having dinner and he's telling me, hey, he made $1 million in a day. And we're talking, and I'm like, the skill set he's talking about, I'm like, well, listen, I do some of this stuff already. I'm seeing like a lot of this. I know this exists. I know that like I talk to people like, Nabil Aziz, right? He was in a 9 to 5. He shifted over to full-time copywriting. I know the kind of projects that it kind of, so in my head, I'm kind of like, man, I need to like replace my income. Like, so I have this mentally, I'm kind of like, I need to be in a position where in 2 to 3 years, I can like generate some kind of business model off my podcast and replace my income. So that's why there's this like internal pressure, but it's like also not bad enough because my job in the same way, it pays well. I like what I'm doing. I respect it for my work and there's good benefits and all that stuff. So there's not a pain point. The struggle I have here is that like in my previous company where I worked, like it was a pretty soul-sucking job. So I was more pressed, like I got this place sucks, I gotta get out. I don't have that like necessarily that urge at like, and then maybe it goes back to this like, I'm content in a way. I'm almost content, but I'm kind of like have this like feeling of like future regret, like 10, 15 years down the road, I did this podcast and I did so many interviews but what did I financially make off of it? Right. And when I see other people who have done similar things, maybe even like less work or like skills that aren't even as polished, I'm just kind of like, man, I could have done it. You get what I'm saying? So there's a lot of anxiety around that. You get what I'm saying? So that goes into the question about like, okay, Saturdays to me is like, okay, I should be grinding Saturdays, Now, partially during the fall, I'm kind of like, I'm going to watch my football games. Like, so there isn't a thing. So now I'm trying to like cram all that into the Sunday. Sunday, I'm like, I got to do everything. You know what I'm saying? So partially, I'm not like pressuring myself because I know I'm going to watch. Like I'm telling you right now, after this podcast, I'm going to like, go watch a football game. You know what I mean? So partially, it's you follow what I'm saying?
Yeah. So mixing up contentment with complacency, right?
Yeah.
I was in a similar position last year, or was it the year before? So for me, when I was in my 20s and my early 30s, my motivation to work hard on a Saturday was that I was not earning well and I needed the extra money.
Okay.
Right? So Saturday would go into producing my books and my online courses and building up my multiple streams of income.
Sure.
But 2 years ago, my multiple streams of income blew up in the sense that I published my history course, 1,500 people signed up, and suddenly I have money, right? It's not a lot of money. It's not one that's going to put me into the millionaire category, but it's enough that I'm comfortable and I'm content. So, the inadvertent negative effect of that was that I lost my motivation to work on a Saturday. I lost my motivation to be hardworking. I started relaxing. I started enjoying life more. And I think now I found a bit of balance. I still relax and enjoy life more now than I did 5 years ago. But Saturday I'm here. I'm working on this. Why? Because now my motivation is different, right? So my motivation right now is that I want to be financially independent by the age of 40.
Okay.
So I've got 3 years, and I've really have to push myself in these 3 years if I want to get there, which means writing better books, producing better courses, learning how to market it better. And most of that gets done on a Saturday because Monday to Friday I'm working my day job, right, with Yaqeen. So Saturday has to go in all of that.
By the way, how does that work for you when you're in South Africa and the time difference?
Yeah, I actually work afternoons and evenings. Yeah.
Okay, so you're clocked in with the 9 to 5 here in Texas.
I would say it crosses over halfway, right? So I start working my actual Yaqeen work around after lunch, and I'm
Okay.
done around 8 p.m. or 9 p.m. my
Okay,
time.
I see.
Yeah,
Okay,
so like the first half of their day crosses over with the last half of my day.
I
So
see.
I'm like in calls and meetings from like 4 p.m. to 9 p.m. every
Okay,
day.
gotcha.
So it doesn't really leave time to write books or to work online courses. So I either do it in the mornings. Although for me, the mornings are more about personal development. I spend my mornings reading, studying, homeschooling my kids, and then I try to put in writing as well. But Saturday is really where that comes in. But now, like you, I'm in a state now where even if I don't do that and I don't earn that extra income, I'm earning enough that I'm comfortable, right?
Yeah, right.
So you need a deeper reason. But another thing that you need, what I gave myself, is a deadline. What's your deadline? Like, at what age do you want to be financially independent? Have you ever thought about that?
I don't think I gave myself an age. I gave myself like a time frame. But the problem is the time frame keeps shifting because I just say 2 years.
If you give yourself an age, that's a set deadline.
Yeah.
That's a set time frame, right?
Right.
So I had to keep moving it, but the fact is, it gives you a sense of urgency and makes you work harder. Because for me, what I tell myself is, I don't want to be working for someone else by the age of 40. I want to be my own man, right? That's what I tell
Yeah,
myself. So
sure.
that motivates me to work on a Saturday.
Okay.
Even though I enjoy my job and I love my job and I'm earning well, but I do want to my next phase of life to be an independent scholar who does what I want, whatever I want.
Right.
So that's my motivation. So I think number one, you need to give yourself a deadline at what age you want to reach a certain financial goal. Doesn't have to be a millionaire. It could just be certain amount of money in the bank account that makes you feel comfortable,
Right.
something like that. And then the other thing is, the other point that's coming to my mind is, look, you are dedicating Saturday to these podcasts, and you're looking at these podcasts as a source of income, but have you even figured out your income generating model yet?
So for me, it's the model that I follow. So I recently took a class. There's a guy named Dan Coe. I don't know if you're familiar with him or not. He's on YouTube. He offered like a class called the 2-hour writer. I took a solopreneur class, but his basic model is about creating the one person brand. Right. You create a followership of a one person brand. So it's not necessarily the podcast, and the podcast is just a vehicle, right? It's about creating followership of getting X amount of followers by creating content, and then so there's different like ideas, but I think I'm not at the level. So I'm still at the phase where I feel like I need to get my viewership, subscriber list, all that stuff up, right? By producing the content and by creating the micro content to generate traffic to the larger form, the long form podcast, right? Long term, the way I look at it is, okay, with that I could write. There's ebooks about productivity, like all these, like Tim Ferriss is the Tools of Titans, right? All these interviews I've done, going back to even interviews from Mad Dumlooks, right? Probably 300 plus interviews now at this point. I could, extract all these nuggets and put it into a book, right? As an ebook, so to speak. But I'm not there. But I'm not thinking product or monetization in that sense yet, because I think the first step to me is to get to the level of getting up the subs, right, and figuring that out and learning what I need to do, because it seems like because people have people have hit me up on DM and they're like, I'm surprised you only have 1.8K subscribers on YouTube based upon the content you have. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know. I'm still figuring it out. I don't know what the algorithm. And partially for me is I always blame myself first. I was like, okay, I'm not as consistent with content as I need to be. I mean, granted, I have 80 some episodes, but that's over the course of like 3 years. I was like, I'm thinking, oh, I should be putting out a podcast once a week. I should be making reels. I need to be like focused on that first to get that. I can't complain about not having enough subs, right? If I'm not doing the grind up front. Like, I don't feel like, I feel like that's an excuse, I would say, to just say, oh, I don't have enough subs. I know why. To me, I think I'm not grinding hard enough.
Yeah, I think one big mistake you're making is you're leaving the monetization for too late.
Yeah.
Right? You you waiting to hit a certain level of subscribers before you start monetizing, and I think that's a big mistake.
Okay.
I started monetizing from day one, and what that meant is it was bringing in $100 to $200 of side money a month in the beginning.
Sure.
And the $100 $200 was just, it seems like nothing, but it's side money, right? It's excess from it goes into savings or investments, right? And I'm not a guy with high subscribers either. I don't know if you know, I don't have a big following like the people I work with. Right? I have 3,000 subscribers on YouTube. My videos get like 50 views. The average video put out gets like 50 views.
Sure.
But my online business generates between $2,000 to $4,000 a month.
MashaAllah.
Right? That's a significant amount of money
Yeah.
for that few subscribers. The only reason I don't normally mention this on air, but the only reason I'm mentioning it just because I'm auditing you, and I believe you making the mistake here.
Okay.
Right? That you're leaving that for too late. You're putting too much emphasis on subscribers. I know of people who have almost no subscribers, but they may have just one video that went viral, and in that video there's a link to a product of this, and they're making money off that product.
Okay.
You need to come up with some kind of product. That's number one. You need to have some kind of product, and everything else needs to build around it.
So right? your products are like ebooks, right? For the most part, courses.
It started off as ebooks, but now it's more online courses. So like my history course, my marriage course, my parenting course, these three specifically, they bring in most of my money.
Okay.
My ebooks bring in maybe between $200 to $500 a month.
Okay.
The bulk of it comes from people purchasing the courses. Although the books may be making me more money in the near future because I just signed a really big deal to publish 2 books, one in 2024, one in 2025. And this time it's not going to be self-published ebooks. It's going to be properly published books by a major publisher that will be available globally. So those 2 could really take me to the next level, inshallah. Allah knows best, right? Some level of success, it's in Allah's hands. He's a Razak. But we have to set the means. So this is my way of doing things. I am constantly working on setting up more and more sources of passive income. More books, more online courses. This is because you do not know which one is going to be the hit. Okay. And that product could be a hit outside of you, outside of your brand, right? Like the history course, people bought it who don't know who I am, who don't care about who I am. It is people told them this is a really good history course, word of mouth. They bought it, they studied it, they told their friends, they bought it, they studied it, right? It's not. It could be that the product itself becomes more popular than you. An example you mentioned earlier that of this would be like the book Deep Work.
Yeah.
Right. Who really knows the author? How many people even know what he looks like? Right. It's the book that's popular. Right. You could write a book like that. Right. It could be that everyone knows this book, and this is like one of the most famous books on this topic, but nobody even bothers to Google who the author is. They just want to read the book. That's how it is sometimes. So I think you're making a big mistake that you're not monetizing yet. I feel like you should have started monetizing 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. If you started monetizing 2 years ago, you would have built up a snowball effect of passive income on the side. And the other issue with this is that if you're not monetizing and you've got this going on for so long, you may be attracting the wrong type of subscribers. You may be attracting people who are expecting only free content. They're not expecting to ever have to pay for anything down the line.
Got you.
Right? But if you have something paid available from the beginning, people know that if I'm following this guy, he's going to be sending me adverts for that, right? He's going to be trying to sell me something. And they still subscribe on top of that, which means that they are potential customers. That they know you're trying to sell them something and they still subscribe. That means they're potential customers. So you cannot like build up this 10,000 followers who think that you're just giving them freebies, and then suddenly you push something on them and they just unsubscribe. They're like, hey, why is he selling me something now?
I makes sense. Yeah, because I was actually talking to one of the brothers who's got a big YouTube following. I won't mention my name, but I think he's got 70K now. and we were talking on WhatsApp, and he was just like, he's trying to monetize too, but he's at 70K, and I'm like, and for him, it's almost like there's a real he did a podcast recently where he was talking about real issues in the community, but he didn't want to name names, and people were like, "Oh, this is boring," and I'm like, "Dude, I think what's happened here," because I learned this from the Dan Cole course, because I made because one of the things I learned in his course was about, because what he does is he teaches people how to use Twitter or X as the initial framework, because I think for most people they can't jump into a podcast or YouTube. There's a lot of back work that has to happen first, right? So I'm kind of, in one sense, he was like, you're already kind of ahead of the game, because you already have an established YouTube and podcast, you know the skills behind it. But he was like talking about, but I'm also trying to build like my competency on Twitter with writing and all that. So I sent him a tweet because this is what this is what the tweet was. So have you ever seen those tweets where people say, if you commit to 4 hours of deep work a day in 6 months, your life will change? Have you seen those tweets?
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, no duh, Sherlock. Like, of course. Like, I mean, you know, and so I think my friend posted that tweet on Instagram stories. So I sent him a reply back, and I said, if you have 4 hours of sex every day for the next 6 months, your life will also change. So I shared that anecdote in my Dan Coe course, and Dan, he laughed. He was like, yeah, but the thing of it is, you gotta be careful. That is like funny and attractive, but you gotta be careful that you don't use it too much, because otherwise you're gonna attract trolls as your main audience. And this is like, and I was talking to my friend who has this YouTube channel. It's like more of a Dawah-based YouTube channel. And I'm like, with the whole Dawah-based YouTube channel and the stuff like debate and stuff, who shows up? A lot of trolls. They're not willing to pay for anything.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think that's one of the things I realized last year when I shifted my channel. Because even my boys at Mad Mamluks is like, it's an entertainment channel, but it's like, what are you gonna like? How, like, what are you gonna sell this audience? In a sense, you get what I'm saying? Other than like, because they're not gonna like, because a lot of people are subscribing. They just there's because the nature of the beast is that like people are calling in for drama. They want to. If you ever see them read the comments, they're like, "Oh, you guys should talk about so and so. So and so said this about so and so," right? I mean, there's like zero money in that though.
Okay, so I think we're making some good progress here.
I do.
I think the big thing you have to do now is figure out a way to monetize yesterday. Right? I mean, if someone has 70,000 subscribers and they still haven't figured out how to monetize, I just think they're not good at business, right? I mean,
right. Or it couldn't. What my point was, it's more like the nature of the genre.
You may have attracted the wrong audience, right?
Sorry,
people who are expecting, people who are there just for entertainment or for drama or for freebies. They're not expecting. This happened to me on Facebook, right?
Okay.
That's why I don't really use Facebook anymore. But
okay,
I initially built up my following on Facebook. I have like over 50,000 followers on Facebook.
Okay.
Most of them don't buy anything ever. They're like, you know, they just expect freebies. And if I do get a message from them, it's like, I can't afford your course, please give it to me for free. And I do it. I give it to them for free. That's what I believe barakah comes from doing that. But the fact is that they're not my primary audience, because I think I kind of targeted the wrong audience on Facebook in terms of the content I built up. So with Twitter, I went a very different route. Now my primary social media is Twitter, where I have like 25,000 followers. And last year, Twitter brought in $10,000 in sales for me, right, in 2021. So, I mean, that's a significant amount of sales just from posting a tweet. The tweet goes viral, and underneath you they have a link to one of my products. Just doing stuff like that.
Okay.
But if you don't have products, what happens if you put out a tweet tomorrow that goes viral and you don't have a product yet? What are you going to do with that? Like, you're wasting your potential there. So if you are serious about monetizing this channel, you have to figure out what your product is, launch it ASAP, and then start building everything else around it. You cannot leave that for 5 or 10 years down the line. You're wasting all that time and you're wasting all that potential. And it could be somebody who subscribes to your channel today would have left your channel or even died before you launch your product, right?
Right. Do you believe in the philosophy of minimal viable product? Like,
Yeah.
just
Yeah, minimal viable products. That's just why I started. I started with very simple ebooks, very simple online courses, and as I brought in money, I used it to upgrade it and produce better quality work. The first few ebooks I put out had like no professional covers or editing or typesetting or anything. Now I hire people to do all that for me, right? You start off with what you can, and you use the profits to build something better. However, I wouldn't really suggest an ebook, right? I wouldn't suggest that for it. It's a very difficult product to sell.
okay.
If you think about it, right? Uh, think about it like this: people buying a PDF. What's the motivation, right? How many PDFs have you bought in your life?
A handful.
I also bought a handful,
Yeah.
but there's always a strong motivation behind those specific ones, right?
I think I'll tell you like the mindset behind how I actually bought it, right? So
Yeah.
there's a guy I follow. So I bought a few. So I'll tell you some of the examples I've used, right? So there's a guy named Ed Lattimore. Do you know Ed Lattimore? He's on Twitter. He was on my podcast early on. He granted me. I met him in person, and we did a podcast together. He's a pretty big Twitter following, like over 100K, and I think he did over 100K a few years ago, actually. So he really did a nice job of like writing on Twitter. So he offers like a Twitter, like a court, like an actual PDF, like a bundle. And because I knew who he was, and he sent an email out like, "Oh, I got my Twitter. There's Black Friday sale going on, and I'm actually like not selling this anymore after this year." It was like $99, right, or something. I think what it was. So I was like, okay, sure, I'll get it and I'll go through it, right? So I did get it. I didn't take much action on it, to be honest. There's another guy named Alexander Juanatoya Cortez, right? He's a fitness guy. And both these guys I actually learned about from Nabil's first channel, like the when he had the Becoming the Alpha Muslim podcast, which from 2017, those guys were on. And Alex has a podcast, like he sell a class called the Skinny Fat workout program or something. Because we're South Asian guys. We have like the skinny fat like body type. So it's $20. He sells it. I think his email, I'm on his email list. So his email does a good job of like, I think, bringing you in. And then he's like, just buy this course for $20. And then that one I used a lot because it's a PDF on Gumroad that I can just like pull up. And then whenever I'm at the gym, I can scroll to my workout day and like I follow it along. You know what I'm saying? So I've bought a few, but I think those guys are really good at, I guess, the email marketing and getting you in.
Yeah. So for a ebook to sell well, and I'm not saying it doesn't. I've sold a lot over the years, right?
Yeah, right.
But there's a few reasons why people will buy an ebook. Number one is if it actually solves a problem for them, right? That's like number one, if it's going to solve a problem for them. Number two is if they really know and trust the author, like this is someone who they want to support financially, because it's easy to pirate a PDF. It's very easy to pirate the PDFs. So once a PDF, by the way, if you do publish a PDF or even a book, it's just a matter of time that it's available as a pirate illegal copy for people to download for free.
Right.
That's where the whole loyalty of the customers come in, right? Where they're like, I can't do this to my man. I have to buy from him.
Right.
But there's something you can't avoid altogether. That's going to happen. So I don't know if the PDF is the best fit for you. You have to figure out what's the book. Is it something that people will actually pay for? Because it happened to a friend of mine recently. He was like really excited to publish a PDF on Gumroad when I told him how well my PDFs are doing on Gumroad. And he overestimated the want or need for the book that he wrote, and he got like 10 downloads, right?
Mm-hmm. I see.
Yeah.
Would you say
I tried to warn him that, listen, this isn't a topic people want to read about.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask you very directly, and maybe you could charge. Maybe send me an invoice later. But, what, knowing what you know about me and my channel and all that, where do you think I should go? If you, because I was thinking ebook first, and then you just said not to do it. I was thinking ebook because that's the lowest viable product, but you're saying
So, I mean, there's a variety of ways you can monetize the channel. It doesn't have to be selling an ebook. You could have a subscription service, right? So you could set up on Gumroad a subscription service where the people who are paying for it, they access more content or deeper content. So maybe on your YouTube channel, you have a 2-hour podcast on productivity, but for the subscribers, there's a 4.5-hour version of it, right? That goes even more detailed. So you could sell subscriptions to a premium version of your podcast. You could sell an online course on how to start a podcast, right? And how to make it successful. You could sell an ebook on the topic as well, but I find that this kind of content, I'm just talking from experience. I published over 20 ebooks and over 20 online courses. This kind of content sells better as online courses. People want that step-by-step instruction. They want to hear you explain it to them. So it just sells better as an online course. So online courses is one way. A subscription service is another way that you could monetize this channel. Third way could be sponsorships, right? Getting other people to advertise on your podcast, but that would mean building up your viewership first, right? Those are three methods that come to mind. There are others, but I guess the only thing I'm worried about here with the ebook is I've seen too many people fail with it.
Right.
If you are going to go down that route, you need to know what you're getting into, and you need to look at your ebook and ask yourself honestly, would I pay for this?
Yeah,
would I pay for this? And if it's something that you would pay for, then others may pay for it as well. That's what I've done. And by the way, not everything I published has been successful, right? I said I published about 20 ebooks. About 5 of them were successful, right?
Yeah.
But you really just need one success. For me, it's just a history course. That's majority of my income for the past 4 years, just that one course. And alhamdulillah for that. But if I wasn't keep trying new things every year, I wouldn't have ended up with that course.
Exactly. I know this is good stuff. I think the thoughts that are going through my head. So when I spoke to like I told you I was having a conversation with Dan Henry, this guy, his brother, new Muslim guy, like he's been Muslim like 9 months now, right? And you know, he was telling me, because I was like, I said a course around, because his entire model is helping people sell their knowledge via digital courses, right? That's his shtick. So he was like, and I was telling him about the podcast, and I was like, well, and I was like, hey, like maybe I could tell, because people have told me like you should, because that question I get a lot is people will reach out and say, how do I start a podcast? Can they help me? And the one thing is, I first a couple years ago, this is Shaykh Joe told me, it's like put a account in Clarity and start charging for your time. Number one.
Yeah.
So off the bat, when people started, now granted, that automatically eliminated a lot of because people will just message me and they want to do a podcast, but it's more like, oh, again, I'm thinking about it. Do you have some time to talk? And I'm like, oh, go to my link and schedule a time. And then they're like, I don't hear from them because they don't want to pay for that, right? So that helped out a lot. Because and Sim would tell you the same thing when we were at Mad Memlooks, that like how many people reached out to him for a podcast, they want to start a podcast and nobody did anything, just wasting your time. So that's number one. I set that up. So I thought this idea is like, oh, I could create a course on how to create a podcast. But the thing Dan told me was this, like Dan was like, people buy off pain. They buy off pain points, not off aspiration, right? Yeah. We touched this on a little bit earlier about this jujitsu thing. Like if my pain point was like, I live in a rough neighborhood and I was getting beat up in front of my kids, right? But he's like, people go off of pain points. So he's like, what are pain points that podcasters have, or people who are starting a podcast? They already, because he's saying was, when you're selling a course on how to make a podcast, you're kind of also having to convince people to you may be convincing people how to build, why they need a podcast in the first place, etc. Now, granted, you could also spin it like, oh, someone wants to start a podcast and they don't know where to start. that could be the angle. That's their pain point. But he was like, what's an angle that people who have podcasts already have pain points with? And for me, it's more like getting guests. And he jumps out of his chair. He was like, that's it. Right? People, if you know how to get guests easily, that should be your course.
And that's a brilliant idea, because networking is something that most people are terrible at, right? For me, it's more of a superpower. I'm connected to almost everyone in the English-speaking Dawa field,
Right?
And you are as well. But most people don't know how to do that. They don't realize how easy it is to do that. You could easily teach a course on that, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how you do it, but I've literally just like flown off to other countries to attend a conference and just walk up to each of the guests and introduce myself. That's how I met Umar Sulaiman. That's how I met Dr. Bilal Phillips. That's how I met
Right.
Yasser Qadhi. I literally just walk up to them and introduce myself. And most people don't realize that people are very welcoming and they're very friendly. And before you know it, you have a connection with them, right? Or you know someone who knows someone. So a lot of people don't know how to do this, or they don't even have the self-confidence to do it. That's another aspect of it.
Mhm.
So you could easily teach a course that covers all these things: networking, self-confidence, how to introduce yourself, your elevator pitch, how to maintain a good relationship with people so that you can bring them back on later. I mean, look at you and I, right? I was talking to you on Mad Mom looks like 5 years ago,
Right.
and now we're talking after 5 years, but it feels like we've been in contact this whole time,
Right.
Because we chat on WhatsApp, right?
Yeah. Right.
So people don't know that. Like, they don't realize that if you want to have a podcast, maybe you need to start a WhatsApp group, to maintain good relationships with people.
Yeah.
These are all things that you have experience in.
Mhm.
Another angle I was looking at, and I was thinking about pain points when it comes to podcasts, is what about starting something for people who have podcasts, but it's failing and they're on the verge of giving up. And they want someone to teach them how to salvage it or how to take it to the next level.
Right.
So they have a major pain point. They love their podcast, but it's not doing well.
Mhm.
What about targeting that audience?
Right. And I think for me, it's like, because I've shifted the direction of the podcast for my channel, right? I think it was funny because there's another podcast in the Muslim space. That guy I was talking with the guy. They haven't put out. I was telling them, like, people are making jokes about your podcast, man. They're saying they missed the janazah for it, because what happens is that people don't like when podcasts phase away. They don't. There's like most of the time they don't make an announcement saying that we're like closing up shop, right? For the most part, I've seen a few that they'll say, "Hey, this is gonna be our last episode. We're moving on to other things, and this is gonna be our last episode." There's a podcast, a locally produced podcast in Chicago that did that. Usually, what happens is they just get so busy and then just like disappear, they just phase out. And then sometimes what happens is like, and you'll start seeing trends of it. You'll see a frequency of guests of episodes, and then after they disappear for like 3 months or 4 months, and they do a show, and then they're gone again for like 4 months, and so they're hanging on. And then it's just like, then it's like 6 months, a year, and you don't know what happened, right? And I don't know what it is, to be honest. And I think that's a really good point, because I've seen some podcasts come in the Muslim space and like just hit. You know what I mean? Like, people are talking about it, they're doing well on views. They have a nice niche, like that's not like this is being tapped into. And then they just disappear. Like, what? And sometimes I message the brother and I'll be like, hey, bro, everything's good? I don't even say I had no issue to upload it. I don't call him out like that. I'll just say, hey, how's everything going? And you'll see the blue check marks like they read it, but then they're like, I don't get a reply. And sometimes I think what happens is that, like, it's tough because you put something out publicly. And I think that's one of the reasons there's a pressure of maintaining the podcast from your listeners, from the community that has already invested in you. You know what I'm saying? That kind of pushes me along too. When I don't feel like, man, because I'm in my head, I'm like, I ain't done a podcast. I didn't release it. I got shown the backlog. I like this one I'm going to release, because we're talking about Philistine. We talked about Philistine in the beginning. I will release this weekend. But like, I have one of the backlog that I recorded in person, like, I don't know, a month ago, that I still need to put out. And that requires a lot more editing because it was in person. So that 5-6 hours of editing, I'm like, I got to find some time for that. But after a while, I'm just like, man, I haven't put out a show in like 3 weeks. I need to publish something. People think I'm dead, right? Or they think kind of. So I think there's that pressure. But when you completely stop and you actually, not that it's not even like the podcast failed. Some of these podcasts were doing well, and maybe life happened to them, and they just like they just had to drop it. But then there's like this I bet there's this like feeling of internal like shame of some type. You get what I'm saying? Like, oh man, I failed because I had this thing. Let me ask you a question. Let's say I'll do a case. So you follow Blogging Theology, like Paul's channel, right? He's done really well. He's got like, I think he might be 300K subs now. How would you monetize a channel? Like if you were coaching him, let's say he calls you up. What would be his monetization model? And he's at 300K and his stuff's all free. I think he has Patreon, I think, but
yeah. So in his case, it would be one of two things. Number one, publish an ebook autobiography on his life story and why he converted to Islam.
Okay.
Right. Everyone loves reading those.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, he could easily sell at least 30K with the following he has, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Of that. But remember, when you're selling, you're not selling to your full audience. You're selling to like 10% or 20% of your audience.
Sure.
Yeah. So the other way would be to have a subscription model, right? Where you're going to go even deeper into these topics, like how I was telling you. I mean, he has incredible guests with like really complex topics. And sometimes you're listening, you're like, I want to hear more, right? So if you had a subscription model where if you want to hear more, subscribe to us, and this is a longer version of it, a lot of people will pay for that just for the quality of guests that he brings on here, right? And the topics they discuss, because they're really discussing things that I don't see being discussed anywhere else. So I think the subscription model would work for him, and maybe the subscription model will bring in, if he has 300,000, it may bring in like 3,000 or maybe max 10,000 subscribers, but that's a lot of money if they're paying $10 a month, right? That's a good amount of side income.
It is.
And
my question with that,
and then you could do that full time. You wouldn't need to do anything else.
The thing of it is that when you mentioned that idea to me, so this may be maybe this is a mental hurdle for me. When you talked about earlier about, let's say I could make a longer podcast and make that available for Patreons only, right? Patrons only. At what point does it become the fine line of, because I don't pay my guests, right?
Yeah.
Because I don't make no money. I think I make $20 a month on Patreon, which covers my Libsyn fee. You know what I mean? But isn't there an expectation now that you have to pay your guests if you're monetizing their content specifically? Does that make sense?
It depends on the guests, right? Because for some guests, just being on that specific platform and the exposure they get could be payment enough, right?
Right.
So just say that you have let's just think 5-10 years ahead, and you have this massive platform with a subscription service.
Yep.
And I come on and we do like a 5-hour podcast on history.
Yep.
And with a link to my history course at the end.
Yeah.
Right. Just that link to the history course to bring in enough income for me to make it worth my time without you having to pay me for it.
Right.
Right. So for many people, just the exposure of being on the podcast, it's payment enough. People wouldn't have heard about their books without it. People wouldn't have heard about their online courses without it. People wouldn't have heard about them without it. Especially if you have the bigger platform. On the other hand, if you're actually like, you've got this one guest on 3 or 4 times, and he's given you like 20 hours of content, it's enough for a full online course, then yeah, I mean, if you've monetized that and made profits, then he may feel entitled to a percentage of that. Not all of it, but a percentage of that.
Sure.
I don't know how that would work.
Yeah.
I've never used that model of business myself. But I guess that's something you'll have to figure out when the time comes, right? I think in the beginning, no guest would really mind. People are just happy to talk about their favorite topics for as long as they can. And the expose itself tends to be payment. Yeah.
That's an that's an interesting model, because with with the connections maybe I've built, I have some friends or guests who think I'm rich because of the podcast. They I won't mention my name, but they're always looking for their bread, you know, and they will ask me like, hey, are you paying? Like, is there money involved? I'm like, nah, bro, you don't make no money. He's like, what's up, man? You've been doing it for 7 years and you're not making any money. Come on. But I think some of them might be open to this idea of a proposition where, okay, we'll do this and then I'll offer you royalties off of it, depending on like, so that's why it's purely based on volume of sales. You know what I'm saying? So you're not committed, and I think that's something that is, definitely fair because you're basically doing all the legwork. They're showing up, giving their time, like you said, and whatnot. So that's cool. That you give me a lot to chew on. So I'll brush through the rest of the week because the Monday through Friday is going to be pretty straightforward. So Sunday will happen. So I'll tell you what happens on Saturday. I'm going to relax. You say there's no problem with that, right? Maybe not pressure, but the idea. But I told you the why behind this pressure is because I'm trying to do this.
Yeah.
Does that change?
So I would say
anything?
if you're really trying to do this,
Yeah.
then you need to dedicate 1 day of the weekend for this and 1 day of the weekend for resting. But rest is very important. If you're not getting enough rest, the whole week goes upside down.
Can you do something where so here's the thing. From an hour time point, because like let's say Saturday, maybe I could do something on Saturday where, okay, I'm only going to watch one football game. And then after 3 p.m., or let's say I'm going to watch a morning game and the evening I'm free. Can I do half Saturday? Because what happens on Sunday is this. So I'll tell you what's likely to happen today. Today, it's like, let's say let's say it goes as originally intended. I watch football all day. Tomorrow, what will happen is that so my ideal Sunday will look like this. And sometimes this happens, but it's not all the time. I will wake up early, go to the gym after Fajr on a Sunday. And actually, I prefer going to the gym in the morning because no one's there. And I like there's a pre-workout you can take. It gives you the caffeine boost so you feel like juiced up too, right? And then Shaykh Amin Kurwadia from Darul Qasim, he has a public tafsir at 11 a.m. It's available on Zoom, but my mindset is, and you can correct me like if you think I'm off here, and I kind of mentioned this earlier. To me, if the Shaykh is in your city, it's to me better to go in person and make the drive than tune in on Zoom for a couple reasons. Number one, the environment of suhbah, right? And secondly, the focus that's there. Because when I'm in front of him, I'm not going to be on my phone. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Versus like, and I might be taking, versus like, if I'm in like on my computer watching it at the same time, I might have checking my phone for WhatsApp in this meantime or something crosses my mind. Let me check this real quick. And it's only a 45-minute class and it's a 30-minute drive there. But to me, that's why I try to make that a thing where I'm going because, and someone like him, I feel like it goes back to this idea of regret of like not regret in a sense, like future regret. Like this, I'm going to regret this in the future because not everyone has access to Shaykh Amin and he makes himself successful and I'm in the city. And if I don't take advantage of this now and like 20 years down the road, maybe that option won't be there anymore. And then I'll be like, what did I do? You get what I'm saying? So that's part of it's there. I think sometimes the pitfall that I have is what happens after class is, afterwards, some of the brothers, they want to hang out, they want to have lunch or something. And so then I'll go with them. I think I need to cut that out. I think I need to just like put something in the schedule right after that forces me to not be doing that. You get what I'm saying? Which I think I might have now because I have my daughters. So this comes into parenting as well. So my daughters sometimes they do these ceramic studios. We have them for free at Iman, Inner City Muslim Action Network, and it's fall season right now. So my intent was tomorrow I would wake up, hit the gym, go to Tafsir, come back, take my kids to ceramics. But then next thing you know, it's like 4 p.m. or 5 p.m. when I'm done. And I still got to do groceries. Right? And then even though Sunday's over. So that Sunday's looking pretty busy. And in there, there's no time for anything for podcasts or building product, right? So where does that look like? A couple things I was thinking about was when my kids are in ceramics, maybe that's when I start working on stuff for the podcast. Because I don't have to be doing it with them. They have their teachers, and I just could go to a side room on a couch and do my thing. But like, you get what I'm saying? Like, but then at 4 or 5 o'clock, when then you do groceries and stuff, then it's like you're cooking for the week. Now it's like 5, 6. I just don't see that at that point. Trying to start something at that point is going to be like kind of fruitless because like I'm out of energy. So my question is, how many hours when you talk about one weekend day? Can you tell me how many? Can we quantify that in hours? Because if I can quantify that in hours, I can block off the time appropriately. Maybe half on Saturday and half on Sunday to do what I need to get done.
Well, that depends on you and what you want to accomplish. I'll tell you how I got started. It was with that Tim Ferriss book, The 4-Hour Work Week, and really I limited myself to 4 hours a week on my side projects. If I can get in 4 hours a week on writing a book or preparing an online course or making content for my website, that brings in side money, and now it's good side money. So I started from the beginning that my side business will be a 4-hour work week, and I stick to 4 max 6 hours a week. With a podcast, I think that may be enough as well. I don't know what you need. You need prep time, you need recording time, you need editing time. Maybe you need time to come up with ideas for new guests and new topics. I think right now you need time to figure out what your monetization route is going to be and how you're going to set that up. I think you should make that your priority. So like when your kids are at classes and you're sitting there, use that time to think, right? To sit and figure out, how am I going to monetize this channel? That should be a priority for you right now. It's important to have time to rest, and it's important to have time for family. This lifestyle people have today of just all work and just being productive 24/7, it's not healthy. It's what goes against the whole lifestyle that a Muslim's supposed to have, which is supposed to be balanced, right? You have your time for worship, time for family, time for yourself, life's not supposed to be all about money, and money should be just one part of your life. But we've become like so obsessed, like every hour we should be working on something that brings in money. That's not an Islamic way to look at things. That's why I feel like you shouldn't feel guilty to watch 1 or 2 games of football a week. Right. I mean, this morning when I woke up at 10 because it's Saturday, and honestly, the past 3 days I did like a whole week's worth of work in 3 days. So I don't feel guilty. I woke up Saturday, I played with the Xbox for 2 hours, and then I came to record the podcast with you. I don't feel guilty about it at all. I earned those 2 hours of rest and that extra sleep because I worked hard throughout the week, and you shouldn't feel guilty about it as well. You need that time. You need time for family. You need time for yourself. So don't feel guilty about that. Figure out exactly what you need to do to make this podcast grow into what you want it to be, which I think at this point in time is something that brings in some kind of side income, some kind of passive income, right? And I'm guessing it will be 4 to 6 hours a week of work that will be needed from you, right?
And you think that's include? You think that's for the product side only? Because here's the thing: when I'm doing so to me, when you say 4 to 6 hours, I can't count actual podcast creation and editing as part of that, because that's already so right now we're doing this podcast. This is let's say this is a 2 hour. By the way, how are you doing on time? How are you on time?
I'm fine. I got nothing else for today.
Right? Okay, you're okay. Cool. So because I think we're almost at 2 hours, and I feel like there's still a little bit more I want to cover. Maybe another 30 minutes or so. But let's say this is like 2 hours, right? This is 2 hours right here where we're just recording. For me to edit, it won't be that much editing because it's StreamYard. But still, to upload everything and make the thumbnail and the show notes and all that, let's say it's another hour for this kind of show. That's 3 hours right there. That's all in just making an episode. That's nothing and that's like best case scenario, right? Yeah. And if it's an in-person podcast, it's going to be a lot more time. Like if I'm doing an in-person podcast, it might take up half a day because often I'll drive to wherever my guest is, set up, record, take down, and then the editing part of that is could be like 3 to 4 hours because it's in person. Mm-hmm. That's why I only try to commit. That's why I'm okay with sticking to right now a once every 2 week cadence, because
Yeah.
to do it every week would just be like too much, right? So it seems to me like I need to find 4 hours for purely monetization.
Yes, you need to focus on monetization at this point.
You know what
I
I'm
don't
saying?
think people realize how much work goes into a podcast, right? Just to
Right.
give you some insight on this, one of my friends recently got hired to do a podcast for a channel
Okay.
once a week, and they hired him for 40 hours a week of work, right? And the podcast ended up taking those full 40 hours of work almost. It
Right.
takes him about 20 to 30 hours a week to produce a 1 hour episode, because he has to find the guests, figure out the topics, do the research. Like if he's interviewing someone who's read a PhD thesis, wrote a PhD thesis on a topic, he needs to read the full book in that time and formulate his questions based on it as well, right? Then there's the editing process, and so he told me that he didn't realize the podcast literally takes up half his week. But that's like where you're doing this really high level professional podcast that you're being paid for. This isn't, a side project. We're talking about a minimal viable project. We're talking about high level productions and minimal viable project. It's not going to be the same. But a podcast will take up a lot of time. In his case, he gets paid to do it, so it's worth that time. In your case, you have to figure out how you're going to pay yourself, and I don't think you've put enough thought into that, right? Because honestly, you should have been making money at least 2 years ago with this podcast.
Okay.
So that should be your number one priority now. Deep thinking time. I don't know how you do your thinking. Maybe that's a topic we can discuss, but you need to have time where you just sit and you figure this out. Like this is it. This is your goal for the next 2 hours, is to sit and think about this.
What about, but how do you prevent the trap of overthinking, of overanalysis?
You give yourself a time limit, right?
Well, because so here's the thing. I think what happens is that, like, so let's say after the show, I'll think about, okay, what is we talked about a number of things, like ideas for a course, right? And I think that, like, so I'll actually tell you this conversation, because Nabil and I were talking about this. Nabil, Aziz, and I were maybe like a month ago. We were saying, because I was saying that based upon what Dan's advice to me was about a product. Because Dan, like, what I appreciate, Dan Henry, his approach is, he's like, he kind of come like you. He's like, don't wait on creating the audience, just make the product and sell it. You know what I'm saying? Because he himself doesn't have a huge, for someone who generates, like, I think he made 30 million in 1 year. He only has 170K followers on Instagram. Well, his YouTube channel isn't that huge, right? So his what I was thinking was, so this is what I mean by overthinking. So we're talking about, like, making a course around helping people get guests or networking, the soft skills, all that stuff, right? And then I was kind of like, okay, should this be under Sultans and Sneakers, or then do I need to create a separate YouTube channel? Because Sultans and Sneakers is about the deep life and productivity and all this stuff, and now I'm doing something a little different. The thought that whole thought process becomes like, oh, I have to now create another channel on the side as well while maintaining this one, all that. You get what I'm saying? That's what I mean by overthinking.
Yeah, so,
like, nothing's happened yet. All I'm doing is thinking, but I'm already creating, like, maybe extra roadblocks that are, like, hampering the thing, rather than, like,
because let me tell you how I deal with something like this, right?
Sure.
I actually did this week. I was thinking of a topic for my next book.
Yep.
And then the thoughts are going through my mind: write a book on this topic, make an online course on this topic, have some kind of retreat on this topic. Then I scale back, say, hold on, let me publish a blog post on this topic and see if people like it. Right? Because if people aren't going to read a blog post on this topic, what's the chance they're going to read a book on it? So I set my goal for this week to write and publish one article on that topic, and next week to look at the Google Analytics and see if people actually read it, right? So the goal here is, if you're thinking too far ahead, just ask yourself, what's the next step, right? What's the next step? Let's not think 5-6 steps ahead. Let's what's the next step? What can I get done this week or this month? And let me only focus on getting that done. So that's what I did with this topic. Next week, I'm going to look at the Google Analytics and then decide if it's worth writing a book on the topic or whether I should move on to a different topic. Because we get ahead of ourselves, right? And we can get stuck. Well, this actually becomes a form of procrastination. That we get stuck in just thinking about 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line, 20 years down the line, but we're not doing anything for now. So when it comes to monetization, figure out what is your next step, right? And focus on that. And just keep focusing on the next step. That's how you build yourself up. So don't think now, okay, do I need to start a second channel? I started a second blog recently. It didn't even cross my mind I'm ever going to start a second blog. But now I have Islamic Self-Help, which focuses on productivity. And I have Izzah Academy that focuses on marriage and masculinity and parenting and basically on family, right? So now I have 2 blogs with 2 sets of online courses and soon 2 sets of ebooks as well. But that wasn't something that I was thinking about. It's like when the time came, I know, okay, this is a topic I want to focus on. I have the time, I have the money, I have the skills. Now I'm starting a second blog. But even with that, I didn't just jump into it. So people, when I was going to start it, people like, why don't you start with a course? Why don't you start with a in-person retreat? I said, no, I'm just going to start with articles. That's a minimal viable product. Write some articles. Produce 2 online courses. Produce an ebook. 1 step at a time. So figure that out for yourself. What's your next step? And then stop yourself from thinking beyond the next step. Instead, use that time to think about how are you going to do that step? What's the process of getting that step done, right? So in your case, the next step is, what is your minimal viable product? And how do you produce that quickly? And how do you produce that quickly? Because you are going to get stuck in and procrastinating if you don't figure out a way to do it quickly. You're going to lose that momentum. The sooner you get it out there, the sooner you can start generating some income. And even if it just brings in $50 or $100 a month, that's going to motivate you to do more, right?
Right.
Because where there's potential for $50, there's potential for $500, and there's potential for $5,000. Because it means somebody paid for it, and there are other people out there who will be willing to pay for it as well.
Right. Yeah, and I think I used to have this mindset that there was no money in the Muslim market for this kind of stuff. And I kind of have absolved myself of that, because I look at the numbers in the English-speaking world, and because I think part of it comes with our own personal inhibitions about like, oh, we want to do things, we don't want to monetize the dawah. And I'm like, for me, this channel isn't necessarily about dawah personally either. It's more like, again, personal product, like micro level, helping Muslim men inspire them to build a deep life, with a lot of, components to it, right? Help them be better at whatever they're, be better overall. Moving along, I think I appreciate all the feedback on this specific because I think this generates a lot of the why for the rest of the week. So how do you allocate, but like, when you talk, the other thing that I had in the week, so Monday starts again, it's going to be a full day, right? When I get home, let's say I get home at, 6:30, 7 p.m. at that point, okay? It's just the nature of the beast. There's nothing I can do about that, right? Where do you, what should I expect from myself to do when I get home at 7 p.m.? Like, let's say I have dinner, and then it's like maybe like 7:30 or 8. And it's like time to go to sleep in like 2-3 hours. Where you would say, would you say don't put pressure on myself to do anything for the product in that window? Like, what should I be doing in the 2-3 hours that could be beneficial, but also like be realistic as far as, what my energy level is? Because my energy level at that point is going to be like pretty sapped.
Yeah. So what time do you start your day? What time do you wake up, rather?
Let's say between 5:30 and 6.
Okay, and then you leave for work around what time?
I don't leave for work until about 8 in the morning. So I'll tell you how it works. So Usually if I wake up between 5:30 and 6, some days if I go to the gym, I'll go to the gym. I don't go to the one every day, but it'll be like the work day. I'll go to the gym. I'll finish there by 7:15, 7:30, come home, make sure my kids have their lunch for school. Like tidy up, make sure I have my lunch for work, because I always pack my lunch every day. And then if it's a day I take my kids to school, like I'll leave at 8. No matter what, I'll leave the house at 8. So either I'll drop them to school, or if my wife if she takes them, then I will leave for work around 8 o'clock. And depending on the traffic, basically between, I've got about 2 hours in the morning from the time I wake up to the time I leave for work. And some of those days, and maybe like 2 days out of the week, of the weekdays, I will go to the gym for about an hour or so.
Okay. So you don't really have much time, high energy level time to focus on this on the weekdays, right?
Right.
So I think you should focus on this primarily on the weekend.
Right.
You should figure out maybe 4 hours on a Saturday and 3 hours on a Sunday for this. What you could do, if you want to get creative with your time, your commute to work, or back, you could use that as your thinking time, or for listening to other podcasts for ideas, or listening to your own podcast to review it, right?
Yeah.
Instead of wasting their time, you use it for that. You could do that. But what I'm worried about here is that because you work a full-time job and you've got the kids to take care of and all of that, you're not really going to have energy to do anything high level after work, right?
Right.
And therefore, I think it's best you leave it for the weekends. Weekdays focus on things like thinking and maybe reviewing, ideation, maybe those kind of tasks, right?
Okay.
But the actual legwork, like the recording, the editing, the marketing, I think leave that for the weekend.
Right. I got you. I think the other trick bag, and that's a typical day. I thought about different things, like taking my lunch break, like a hard lunch break or something, where I can, focus on this kind of stuff. Because Cal Newport talks about this, Arthur of deep work in this podcast. If you can get your work done in, but it's aspirational though, and that's something that's like not realistic. Is like the volume of work corporate America grinds you, right? There's like if you're most people who are doing something where they're pretty busy, it's hard for them to like condense 8 hours of work down into 6 or 5.
Yeah.
It actually 8 hours of work stretches into 9 or 10, more so than anything else, right? Mm-hmm. The other big pillar, the last thing I wanted to cover is, so I mentioned that so as far as Islamic Studies goes, right? So going to Shaykh Amidst Tafsir is something that I try to go to, but there's no other commitment to that, I would say, because it's just showing up and listening to the talk. There's no like homework or review. It's just like I'm going there for the stuff about getting some benefit, and again like a little recharge. I recently started also taking like Maliki Fiqh, which comes up. He has it at 7 a.m. On a Wednesday on Zoom, but that also is only like 40 minutes, and it's not like homework or review. It's more like you're benefiting, because I'm like, again, it's the avenues there, right? The one that's a trick bag for me is Arabic. So I've been doing Arabic through Studio Arabiya for the last 2 years, and I think I made progress. I used to do 2 hours a week. I only do 1 hour a week now. My 1 hour is on Tuesday evenings. I used to be on Sunday evenings because I like the weekend for it. But then Sundays can get crazy. There's weekend stuff, and the biggest pressure with that is that my teacher gives me homework. Right? It's not a lot necessarily, but it's just like with everything else going on, oftentimes I don't get to it, and you feel there's like guilt about it. Now sometimes I just tell them like, "Ana kaslan jiddan." I'm very lazy or something, why he asked me like, and he just laughs. He's like, nah, he's like, la mushkila, no problem, but it's still like, I feel like, and it's progressing. And because I'm in a program and it's been 2 years and I'm progressing, it's one of those things that I don't want to give up, but I'm also, when we talked about jujitsu earlier, it's one of those things that like, could it fall into it's nice to have?
Yeah.
But at
I
this
was
point,
about to mention the exact point.
what?
I was going to mention the exact point, right? This is another nice to have, not a necessity. My approach to language learning is this: if you really have strong motivation to learn a language, you will pick it up within 18 months, right? But the strong motivation for Arabic, for example, will come from either living in an Arab land, or you actually trying to understand Arabic books, right? If you don't have either of these two motivations, it's just a nice to have. Like you, as an English speaking podcaster in the USA, there's no practical reason why you need to master the Arabic language, right? Uh, so it's a nice to have, because again, as Muslims, we feel guilty if we don't know Arabic. We feel like, we should be able to understand the Quran and things like that. But there's the other angle here, is that the other important angle is that it is important to have ongoing education in Islamic studies, right? Because this works as a weekly nourishment of the soul, even if there's nothing else that comes out of it.
Yeah.
It gives you the connection to the Quran, to the Hadith, to the ulama, and you need that. Even if you feel like you're not getting anything else out of it, just getting that out of it has a strong impact on one's iman, because we don't want to be isolated from the community, right? What happens to many of us is that life just becomes about money, and it just becomes about work.
Yep.
But now, if you at least once or twice a week going for something Islamic, you're taking a break from the dunya to focus on something that has no worldly benefit. It's all for Allah. It's all for the akhirah, right? And that's important for your soul. So that will fall under self-care for the soul. So that's important that you keep these things up. Not necessarily Arabic. You could replace Arabic with tafsir or history or aqidah or anything like that. You get the same spiritual benefits out of it, maybe more. But I have noticed this when I was in my 20s. I was an Arabic teacher. I used to have these same style Arabic classes for the average working class person, and they would show up for 1 or 2 hours a week, and nobody would do their homework. Uh, and there'd be these guys who, like, every year they just restart book one, and they do that for 6, 7 years, right?
But for me, this is different. So this is the thing about this is like it's one-on-one,
right?
So it's not like, so I did the model where I learned nothing before when I was in a group class, because if I didn't do my homework, I would just fall behind. So what happens now is that, like, if I don't do my homework, my instructor will just do the homework in class. He'll just tell me, like, so I'll tell you the typical. This is basically how the class will. It's Arabic, that's the books we're going through. So he's basically we'll read a lesson, and then he'll have me read it, and then he'll identify the verbs and conjugate, and his homework will be basically like there's going to be like 20 or 25 words, including conjugations, and he'll just say your homework is to like have every word in a sentence, right? Yeah. And so sometimes I usually will do like half the homework, because it's like it comes up to a lot, like 25, 30 sentences sometimes, because like, and a lot of times when I'm doing the homework, my mind's like gets creative or something. He wants to like be fancy. And then sometimes, and I think he told me like recently, like, don't worry about being fancy, just be like upfront, just be kind of straight up with it, right? He's happy with that. A lot of times I won't do it. He will be like, okay, we'll just do it now. He'll just grill me on the spot and just be like, use this in a sentence, and I'll like kind of like fiddle around, like, okay, try this, try that, right? So it's more like the thing. My fear if I drop it is that I feel like I have made progress in the last 2 years, right? Is that I am concerned about at some point later I'm gonna get the bug to do it again, and then I'm starting all over. You know what I'm saying? Like, because it would be different if I said in the last 2 years I haven't learned anything. Because I've done programming where I feel like I don't know, I didn't learn anything. But this time I feel like I am learning, and it's just like an hour a week. It is tiring because it's Tuesday night, and I'm like, sometimes after work it's that intellectual activity, and I fight through it, right? And if I'm really tired, I will reschedule my class to another time. Like they give me that option, but it's more like finding that time, the guilt of the review period, so to speak, that I want to like. I'm not putting enough effort in outside. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. I feel like your Arabic is falling in the same category as Jiu-Jitsu.
Okay.
It's there's just there's no real motivation. Like I said, if you want to learn a language, anyone can pick up a new language in 18 to 24 months if you really need it, right?
Yeah.
Uh, the problem here is I don't think you see any actual need for it. Now, if you decide to move to the Arab world and become a podcaster in Arabic, and by the way, there's a much bigger market in Arabic than English for Islamic podcasts. I don't know if you've seen this. Like when I watch an Arabic podcast, they have like 15 million views. Like
Yeah.
those numbers are mind-boggling because they're far more Muslims who speak Arabic than English, right?
There was an
So-
idea that we told Sheikh Amr when we were with Mad Mamluks a few years ago. We were telling Sheikh Amr that we should do an Arabic Mad. He could be the Arabic
Yeah.
host. Actually, both him and Mort. I think they both speak Arabic. So,
Yeah.
but it never went anywhere. So,
I mean, the Arabic podcasts, they're gonna reach a lot more people.
right.
I realized this recently with my books as well. We don't realize that, I guess because we're living in these countries, we don't realize that a very small percentage of Muslims in the world speak English.
Right.
It's like not anywhere close to number one, right? There are far more Muslims that speak Arabic, Turkish, Bahasa, Urdu, and all these other languages in English. And I realize with my own books and courses, I need to figure out ways to translate them into other languages so they reach more people. Because with English, we are limited primarily to minorities in the West. And not to not even all minorities in the West, because the minorities, like in France, speak French instead of English, right?
Right.
So it's literally just the UK, South Africa, Australia, and USA and Canada, just those 5 countries, all of which have like 2% Muslims. So if you compare that to the global number of Muslims, it's a very small amount of people that we can actually reach with English. We would have to learn other languages or get our content translated if you want to reach more Muslims. So that's something I'm working on for myself as well. But maybe that could be a motivational factor to learn Arabic, that you actually want to be a podcast in Arabic. But I don't see that practically working while living in the US, unless you move to an Arab neighborhood where everyone's just screaming at each other in Arabic. And I don't know, but
Well, I do kind of. So one of the original motivations was my oldest daughter was. So we live in an area called Little Palestine.
right.
Our neighborhood. Yeah, it is like basically everything. If you go outside, it's all Palestinian. So sometimes I'll my daughter when she was in they go through their pre-K, they're Bangladeshi, but they go through pre-K, it's Arabic immersion. So I remember when she was coming home from school, she was talking Arabic fluently, and we didn't know what was going on. We didn't know what she didn't know English or not. She was just speaking Arabic for a couple of years. So then I was like, man, I need to learn this stuff. So I think there's this, but again, yeah, I hear what you're saying. It's like a nice to have, but for me, it's like it goes back to because less so with jujitsu, because jujitsu I'm still a white belt. Like I don't think I've done that. I've gotten, maybe I could take down a brand new guy, but like I haven't gotten that much advanced. But with Arabic, I feel like I've made a decent dent in it. You know what I'm saying? And
you don't think this is the sunk cost fallacy, that you've already put the time into it, so you don't want to stop now?
it could be. It really could be. So I'll be very like. So people ask me why did I leave Mad Mamluks, right? The ultimate reason was that I stopped getting personal like it was a bandwidth issue because I was full-time job, and now I was doing like Wednesdays after work I would drive to the studio and do the and get home like after 11 o'clock. So it was just like tying me up. Sometimes the podcast on the weekend, my show wasn't getting that, and I wasn't really. But for me, ultimately, it was like I wasn't getting as much value out of it for myself as I was in the beginning, right? Personally, so I dropped it, right? With this idea that it's going to free up more time for Sultans and Sneakers. That did not happen. I just wasted my time elsewhere. So this is me being like a little critical of myself in that, like because I want the I think if I just drop it, it's not going to be filled up with, because that Tuesday night, I'll tell you that Tuesday night, when I reschedule it for another day, what's going to happen is I will just maybe watch TV or something, watch YouTube, take a nap, go to sleep, relax. if I fight through it on Tuesday night, at the end of the day, that hour was a struggle, but I still learned something. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
Versus like it's not gonna be, and that's why I moved it Tuesday night versus because, and then to me it's more like I just feel like I had to find an hour elsewhere in the week to do a review. So, and I'm like, that should be feasible, and that's just my own shortcoming. Like I gotta find like even 2 30-minute blocks. Sometimes I'll schedule myself at work. I'll schedule myself an office during a lunch break a couple of times a week just to like midday just to review some Arabic. Because I think that's all my instructor asks. He's not like, he's like, I think because the audience for Studio Arabiya is like Western students, like in our boat. They're not like, my expectation isn't to be a master, but I am looking. There's instances in my life where I go to the Arab world, I go to Morocco and I meet Mashayikh and I need a translator and I know nothing. And now I can actually like maybe have some sort of like at least joke with them a little bit or something. You know what I'm saying? So I think but again, it's a nice to have. It could be sunk cost fallacy, but I'm also like, what
you don't want to waste the time. You
worry
like that if you give this up, then that time is just going to be wasted in something less productive.
Yeah,
right?
Parkinson's law will just say, yeah. So
yeah,
that's what it comes down to. I think if I'm being honest with myself, it's
well, I mean,
like
if you're doing the Arabic just to have to use your time productively, learning something that's beneficial in the long run,
yeah,
then there's no problem with that. I mean, you shouldn't. You're not wasting the time, at least.
yeah.
But you're not going to master Arabic that way at all. Another 15 years is going to go by and you're going to learn like very little, because that's just the nature of languages. You can't learn languages in that way. I've learned that the hard way as a teacher of languages.
Okay.
That you cannot learn a language in this way. The only way to learn a language is just throw yourself into it completely.
Right. It's there's no like, even though there's progress, but like to me it seems like, okay, let me just inch along, and then in 2 years from now, I'll be better than I was today. Because like today I'm better than I was 2 years ago.
How would that help you? How would that benefit you if you like maybe just learned 100 new words and 5 new grammar rules in those years? Like exactly
Right.
What difference would that make to your life?
I guess to me it's like, but then at one point in time there's gonna be I guess the idea is all of a sudden I'll be I'll have some time to do a dead sprint for 12 months, but I already have 4 years of like kind of like some literacy built up. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I get
So because I think one of the goals of like financial independence is, as you alluded to, the corporate American lifestyle just does not give you much time for like other pursuits, right?
Mm-hmm.
Monetizing a podcast or the digital, those guys are not working like the crazy hours that people in corporate America work.
Yeah.
That's what I've noticed.
That's why I did that for myself.
Yeah.
That's what I did. I pulled myself out of the system. I work my own hours.
Yeah.
Right. So even on a weekday, I can start at 9 a.m. and still get everything done. And I have a much more relaxed schedule. And I think that's what you want for yourself, right?
Yeah. And so to me, that is like that when you because people were asking, well, when are you going to find the time? Well, that's the whole point. The whole point is in 3 years. But I also want to say, like, yeah, it is sunk cost in a way, because I guess you never forget, but like at the end of the day, like it comes down to at the end of the, like, this, like if I'm going to have that lifestyle, I need to live like that lifestyle now as far as being efficient with my time.
Yeah.
Because that kind of money doesn't just come to like lazy people, like people who are lazy or like slacking and like wasting time. That's just the reality. So to me, like dropping it, it's like I know myself. It's more like maybe it applies more to jujitsu, right? But even that would apply only if like, okay, I was going to the gym. Like, to me, it's like physical activity. I treat the gym and jujitsu interchangeably. Like if I go to jujitsu one day, I'll be like, okay, I don't have to go to the gym that day. And I'm like, I have to get physical activity in, right? That's not because it helps me mentally, all that stuff. There's so many other benefits of it, right? You can't just like let yourself go there. That's just not like, to me, that's not going to be an option. Plus, I might just like, if I don't do it, I might just die prematurely. Allah, takes us when He wants, but when He wills. But like, you got what I'm saying. So yeah, I think that's the thought process there with Arabic. So I think for me it's more like finding the time, and I think we go back to the energy management. So let's not beat myself up too much about not doing it, or like telling myself beginning of the day, oh, I'm gonna work on that at 8 p.m. tonight when I get home. Like that's just like not gonna that probably isn't gonna work, right? It's more like just be realistic and consume like the thing. Where do you find? Because I think the new fallacy that it's entered the new thing enter my head is like my daughter. I mentioned earlier she started HIFs, so I always had this idea that when kids do HIFs, the parents should do HIFs too. Like, you know what I'm saying? There's so much emphasis on kids doing HIFs, and so now I'm like, okay, I gotta find time to do that. And obviously, based upon what we're talking about, there's like that sounds like not another nice thing to have, but probably not the best idea to like go down that route right now.
Yeah. There's certain things that's easier for children to learn than adults, right?
Right.
And not only do they have more time, but their brains are more. Their brains are in the learning mode, and ours already settled into certain ways of thinking, and so it's not like if the kids are learning, I can learn it at the same time. Not always the case, especially if it's something that's intensive.
Right.
So yeah, Arabic, I don't think you should pressure yourself about it. Keep it going. It's a good deed. It's not a waste of time. But if you're serious about learning Arabic, somewhere down the line you need to change strategies, right? So maybe once you make your money, go and live in a Muslim country, Arab country for 1 year and just absorb it. Which will be easier to do with this background of spending once a week, right? But I really don't think it's possible to really learn a language in this manner. It's just not the most effective way of learning a language.
Gotcha. Well, I think that's pretty much it. I think and every other week, and then where do you advise people make time for like daily? So as far as al-rad and like dhikr goes, I do it in my car. I do it on my morning commute.
Yeah.
Because I talked to my teacher and I was like struggling with doing it. He's like, just do it in your car. Like, don't like try to perfect. Like, because I think in the beginning I was like, it's gotta be perfect. I gotta have a room in my house after Fajr, in 20 minutes. He's like, just do it in my car. Just do it in your car. He's like telling me like, oh, I do it in my car, right? Don't make it too complicated. So that's worked for me. As far as like daily Quran recitation and stuff like that, that's another thing I struggle with. Is that something that can be done maybe in the evening time? That's more of a relaxing thing versus
So how much Quran are you looking to recite today?
I mean, like a juz a day. That's my goal, but like I've done it before, but it hasn't like.
So I'm gonna be honest with you. I do half juz a day.
Okay.
Right, because I find that's reasonable in terms of what I can actually fit into the day, and also in terms of what I can concentrate on properly. Because if I'm going to go for a juz a day, halfway through I lose my concentration, and then it's not the same quality, right? I want to do quality worship.
Do you do?
So for me,
Sorry, do you do it in the morning, or do you have a certain time of day you dedicate?
I do. So the mornings for me are dedicated to personal development. So when I start my day, this is how I start my day. I do after breakfast. I'll do gratitude journaling. Half juz Quran. Read about 50 pages from a book. And then either study an online course or listen to a podcast, and then I start my work day.
Before.
So I have like a full morning routine of personal development. But reciting Quran is part of it. That's like non-negotiable. I have to recite Quran every day.
Yeah. Would you, for me, based on my schedule, do you think I should just get up earlier at like 4:30?
Yeah, I mean, just, again, the best time to recite Quran is the early morning, right?
Yeah.
I think it's one of those things you should do as soon as possible in the day, because once the day goes, not only will you not find time, but if you do find time, your brain is distracted. You're not going to give that quality to it because your brain is focused on work, or it's focused on your podcast, or focused on something else. But it's early morning hours, you can give quality attention to the recitation, right? So you're not just reciting, but you may be reflecting on it as well, right? So put it in somewhere early in the morning, right? That would be the best time to recite Quran.
Yeah, I don't know if the podcast that did with Dr. Muhammad Gilan. That was the last episode that dropped. I think he talks about like how he does his routine, his daily recitation. I think he starts in the day. He has a set goal. He didn't tell me what the goal was per day. But he does he tries to get it in the morning. If he doesn't, I think he resumes it on his phone, on his app. And he like finds breaks during the workday, just pops into the chapel and like at work, at the office, and just knocks it out then. So because go ahead.
Yeah, so I also I don't have a physical mushaf. I have the app on my phone.
Okay.
Because for me it's like when I also would recite Quran in all over.
Yeah.
So wherever I have time, I'll just pick up the app and continue recitation.
Mm-hmm.
Same with the dhikr and du'as. I have the apps on my phone, so you can just pick it up. If you're sitting in a queue somewhere or stuck in traffic, you can just do a bit of that. So that's a good way to fit it in. Yeah.
I gotcha. Okay. Sounds good. Well, shit, Jazakallah khair. I appreciate it. This is really beneficial for me at least, and I hope that anyone listening can benefit from as well. Any closing thoughts on your end?
Well, not really. I think we covered a lot. Alhamdulillah.
Yeah.
I like the approach you took. When you said you want to do a podcast on productivity, I'm like, not that again. Like I've done like I don't know how many podcasts on productivity in the past 2 years.
Right.
This approach, this was good. This got me thinking on a different level, and I think we covered angles to productivity that we don't normally cover. Right. So this is brilliant. Keep up the good work. I'm giving you some homework. I'm leaving you with some homework. Right?
Sure. Okay.
Figure out your monetization plan and get back to me on that.
Okay. And the deadline is?
I'll give you a month.
Okay. All right. So
November.
I do hope to release this inshallah this weekend. Like I said, so this is the weekend of the 14th of October. So people will, so I'll maybe put some skin in the game too. I'll basically maybe post something about it, what the plan is. I see. I'm all about transparency. To say I don't like. It seems like when I look at other content, like non-Muslim content creators, a lot of times they're very transparent about it, and it doesn't like take away from the fact that you wouldn't want to buy it. Like people have this idea that like, oh, you're secretly trying to sell it to me. I'm like, no, I talk about it openly because like we have to make.
I've been transparent about it from day one because it weeds out the people who will judge you for selling things online. Like it weeds them out very early, right?
Yeah, right.
So I'm very transparent about it. People ask me like, how can you sell things? I'm like, it's a business. I said, Islamic self-help is a business. That's why it's not a dawah organization. It's my business.
Yep. Right.
And so if you don't like the business, go support a different business. So what's the big deal?
Right. And then really quick, if somebody wants to like take one of your courses, what's the best way to find those? Yeah,
IslamicSelfHelp.com. Right. Okay. It's all there. It's divided into 2 sections besides the blog. There's books.islamicselfhelp.com and courses.islamicselfhelp.com. So with Gumroad, I have some of my online courses and all of my ebooks. And then on courses.islamicselfhelp.com, they'll find all of my other courses. So it's divided into 3 sections: the blog, the book section, and the course section. But it's all there. Yeah.
Gotcha. All right. Well, if you have nothing else from our listeners out there, if you have any questions or comments, you can email me at info@sultansandsneakers.com. If you want to support the channel financially, you can become a patron at patreon.com/sultansandsneakers. If you're watching on YouTube, please like, subscribe, leave a comment. And if you're listening on the audio platforms, please also leave a review on Apple Podcasts. You can leave a rating on Spotify. For my special guest, Shaykh Ismail Kamdar, I'm your host, Mahin the Podcaster, signing off. Assalamu alaikum.